My name is Vivian Pierce, and I never thought I'd be plotting revenge against the man I've loved for 20 years. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a typical Tuesday evening. I was chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic thud of the knife against the cutting board a soothing counterpoint to the muffled sounds of Ada's TV show in the living room. The front door opened and closed, signaling Ron's return from work. "Viv, we need to talk," he said, his voice oddly strained. I turned, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "What's wrong?" Ron's face was pale, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I've been having an affair." The knife clattered to the floor. "What?" "With Leanne, my business partner." The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "How long?" "6 months," he admitted, his gaze fixed on the floor. "6 months," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "And you're telling me now because—" Ron finally looked up, his expression a mix of guilt and determination. "Because I'm leaving you. For her." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Just like that? 20 years of marriage, and you're throwing it away for what? Some midlife crisis fling." "It's not a fling, Viv. I love her. And—" He hesitated, then plowed on. "I'm taking Ethan with me." "Ethan?" I gasped. "You can't be serious." "Leanne has connections in the music industry. She can help him become a professional musician. It's what's best for him." "And what about Ada?" I demanded, fury rising in my chest. "You're just going to abandon your daughter?" Ron's face twisted. "Ada's different. She needs stability. And let's face it, her prospects aren't exactly bright." The slap echoed through the kitchen before I even realized I'd moved. Ron stumbled back, his hand flying to his reddening cheek. "Get out," I hissed. "Get out of my house, you selfish bastard." He left without another word, the front door slamming behind him. I sank to the floor, my back against the cabinets, as the magnitude of what had just happened washed over me. "Mom?" Ada's tentative voice came from the doorway. "Is everything okay?" I looked up at my daughter, her brow furrowed with concern, and made a silent vow. Ron may have shattered our family, but I'd be damned if I let him destroy our future. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. "Everything's going to be fine, sweetheart," I said, rising to my feet. "In fact, things are about to get a whole lot better." The morning after Ron's bombshell, I woke to an empty house. Ethan's room was stripped bare, his prized guitar gone. The silence was deafening. I found Ada at the kitchen table, her cereal untouched. "Where's Ethan?" she asked, her voice small. I swallowed hard. "He's gone to stay with your father for a while, sweetie." "Is he coming back?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to face. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we're going to be okay, you and me." Ada nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. It mirrored my own. The next few days passed in a blur of legal paperwork and hushed phone calls. I hired a divorce attorney, my hands shaking as I signed the retainer agreement. This wasn't how our story was supposed to end. A week after Ron left, I received a text from Ethan. "Mom, I'm sorry. Dad says this is for the best. I'll call when I can." I stared at the message until the screen went dark, fighting back tears. My son, my baby, torn away by a man's selfish ambition. That night, I overheard Ada talking to herself in her room. "I'm not stupid," she muttered. "I can do things too." My heart clenched. Ron's cruel words about Ada's prospects echoed in my mind. I knocked gently on her door. "Hey, sweetheart, what are you working on?" Ada quickly covered her sketchpad. "Nothing." I sat beside her on the bed. "Can I see?" Reluctantly, she revealed a beautiful, intricate drawing of a fantastical cityscape. My breath caught in my throat. "Ada, this is amazing. When did you start drawing like this?" She shrugged, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "It's just doodles."
No, it's not.
"It's art. Real art." An idea began to form in my mind. "How would you feel about taking some art classes?" Ada's eyes lit up. "Really? You mean it?" For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. "Absolutely. We'll find you the best art school in the city. As I tucked Ada in that night, I made a silent vow. Ron may have taken Ethan, but he wouldn't define our future. I would prove him wrong about Ada, about our family. And if I had to tear apart his carefully constructed new life to do it, so be it. The game had changed. It was time to show Ron exactly what he'd walked away from and what he'd unleashed. The Westfield School of Arts was a beacon of hope in our newly fractured world. As Ada and I walked through its colorful halls, her eyes widened with wonder. "Mom, look at all the paintings," she exclaimed, tugging at my sleeve. I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "This could be your work on these walls someday, sweetheart." The admissions director, MS. Patel, greeted us warmly. "Ada's portfolio is quite impressive for her age," she said, leafing through the sketches we'd brought. "We'd be delighted to have her join our program." Ada beamed, and I felt a fierce pride surge through me.
Take that, Ron.
As we discussed tuition, my stomach clenched. The costs were steep, but I'd make it work. I'd drain every last penny of my savings if it meant giving Ada this chance. Later that night, after tucking Ada in, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of financial documents. As I sorted through old bank statements, a crumpled receipt caught my eye. It was for a business dinner Ron had claimed as an expense, but the date— my blood ran cold as realization dawned. That was the night of our anniversary, when Ron had claimed to be working late. Fueled by a mix of anger and determination, I dug deeper. More discrepancies emerged: inflated expenses, suspicious transfers, clients that didn't seem to exist. A pattern of fraud began to take shape, hidden beneath layers of financial obfuscation. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Mom, things are weird here. Leanne keeps pushing me to practice. Dad's always stressed. I miss you and Ada." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. My son needed me, and I was powerless to help him.
Or was I?
An idea began to form. If I could prove Ron's fraudulent dealings, I might have leverage, not just for a better divorce settlement, but to bring Ethan home. The next morning, I called an old college friend who'd become a forensic accountant. "Sarah, I need your help," I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve. "I think my ex-husband's been cooking the books, and I want to nail him to the wall." Sarah's response was immediate. "Send me what you've got. We'll go through it together." As I hung up, I caught sight of Ada's latest drawing on the fridge, a vibrant phoenix rising from the ashes. It felt like a sign. Ron had underestimated us, dismissed Ada's potential, and torn our family apart. But from the ashes of his betrayal, we would rise, stronger, fiercer, and ready to fight for the future we deserved. Ada's transformation at Westfield was nothing short of miraculous. Within weeks, her confidence soared, and her artwork evolved from simple sketches to complex, emotion-laden pieces that left her teachers in awe. "Mom, look." Ada burst into the kitchen, brandishing a canvas. "MS. Patel says I might get to show this at the school's exhibition." I hugged her tight, my heart swelling with pride. "That's incredible, sweetheart. I always knew you had it in you." As Ada's world expanded, mine narrowed to a laser focus on bringing Ron down. Sarah, my forensic accountant friend, had confirmed my suspicions. Ron's business was a house of cards built on fraud and deception. "We've got enough to take this to the authorities," Sarah said during our latest late-night strategy session. "But are you sure you want to go nuclear? This could destroy him." I thought of Ethan's increasingly distressed messages, of Ron's dismissive words about Ada, of the years I'd spent supporting his dreams while mine gathered dust. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steel. "He made his choice. Now it's time for consequences." The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Linda, armed with a stack of damning financial records. "This changes everything," Linda said, her eyes widening as she pored over the documents. "We can use this to negotiate a much more favorable settlement. And if Ron doesn't play ball, we go to the DA." I nodded, a grim smile playing on my lips. "Let's do it. I want full custody of both kids and a significant portion of the business assets. Ron can keep his precious Leanne, but that's all he gets to walk away with. Linda raised an eyebrow. You're not pulling any punches, are you? He certainly didn't, I replied. That afternoon, as I picked Ada up from school, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Mom, I can't take it anymore. Leanne's pushing me to audition for this big competition, but I don't want to. Dad won't listen. Can I come home? My heart ached for my son, but I forced myself to reply carefully. Soon, honey. I promise. Just hang in there a little longer. As we drove home, Ada chattering excitedly about her latest art project, I steel myself for the battle ahead. Ron had no idea what was coming. He'd underestimated me, written me off as a passive victim in his grand plan. But I was done being a supporting character in my own life. It was time to reclaim my story and my children's futures, no matter the cost. The war was about to begin, and I intended to win. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, its official seal gleaming under the kitchen lights. Ada's hands trembled as she opened it. Mom, she squealed, her eyes wide with disbelief. I won. I won the Young Visionaries Art Award. I wrapped her in a fierce hug, tears pricking my eyes. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You've worked so hard for this. As we celebrated with ice cream sundaes, my phone buzzed. It was Linda, my lawyer. Vivian, have you seen the news? She asked, her voice tense. Ron's company is in freefall. Rumors of fraud are everywhere. I glanced at Ada, still beaming over her award, and stepped into the other room. What does this mean for our case? It means we've got him cornered. He'll be desperate to settle. A grim satisfaction settled in my chest.
Good.
Push harder. I want everything we discussed. Later that night, as Ada slept peacefully, her award certificate proudly displayed on her nightstand, I scrolled through social media. A photo of Ethan caught my eye. He was on stage at some posh venue, looking thin and exhausted. The caption, posted by Leanne, gushed about his dedication and upcoming big break. My heart clenched. I clicked through to Ethan's profile, noting the lack of recent posts. Then I saw it, a comment he'd left on a friend's photo of a casual jam session. Wish I could just play for fun like that again. Miss the days when music wasn't all about pressure and perfection. Anger surged through me. How dare they push my son to the breaking point for their own ambitions? Just then a notification popped up, a direct message from Ethan. Mom, I can't do this anymore. Leanne's got me booked for this huge showcase next month, but I'm falling apart. Dad won't listen. He just keeps talking about all the money they've invested in my career. I don't know what to do. I typed back immediately. Hang in there, honey. I'm working on bringing you home. Trust me, okay? Setting down my phone, I pulled out the folder of evidence against Ron. It was time to accelerate our plans. I wouldn't let my son suffer another day under their toxic influence. As I worked late into the night, strategizing with Linda via email, I felt a shift in the air. The tables were turning. Ron's carefully constructed new life was crumbling, and I was poised to reclaim what he'd stolen from us. Let him feel desperate, I thought. Let him feel the ground shift beneath his feet. Because when I'm done, he'll have nothing left to stand on. The doorbell rang, shattering the peaceful Sunday afternoon. I opened the door to find Ron standing there, looking haggard and defeated. Behind him, Ethan slouched, his eyes downcast. Vivian, Ron said, his voice hoarse. We need to talk. I crossed my arms, blocking the entrance. About what, Ron? Your failing business? The fraud charges? Or maybe how you've been driving our son into the ground? Ron flinched. Please, can we just come in? It's all fallen apart. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. As they entered, Ada appeared in the hallway, her eyes widening at the sight of her brother. Ethan, she cried, rushing to hug him. Ethan's face crumpled as he embraced her, and I saw tears in his eyes. In the living room, Ron sank onto the couch, head in his hands. The company's gone, he mumbled. Leah, she took what was left and disappeared. I've got nothing left. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, quickly followed by concern for Ethan. And what about our son's promising career? I asked sharply. Ethan looked up, his expression a mix of relief and shame. It's over, Mom. I can't do it anymore. I never wanted any of this. Ron's head snapped up. But all the money we invested. Enough. I cut him off. You've done enough damage. Ethan, honey, go upstairs with Ada. Your father and I need to talk. As the kids retreated, I turned to Ron, my voice low and dangerous. You have some nerve showing up here after everything you've done. I know, Ron said, his voice breaking. I've ruined everything. But Vivian, please. I don't know what to do. I thought I had it all figured out, but now you've lost it all. I finished for him. Your business, your mistress, and worst of all, the trust and respect of your children. Ron nodded miserably. Can we start over? Maybe if we work together. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Start over? Ron, there's no starting over. You destroyed our family. You dismissed Ada's potential and pushed Ethan to the brink. And for what? Your midlife crisis and get-rich-quick schemes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'll do anything to make it right. I stood, my resolve hardening. You want to make it right?
Fine.
But we do this my way. You'll sign whatever papers my lawyer puts in front of you. You'll get help, real help, to be a better father. And you'll face the consequences of your actions, legal and otherwise. Ron nodded, defeated. Whatever you say, Vivian. I'll do anything. As I watched him slumped on our couch, I realized the true victory wasn't in his downfall, but in the strength I'd found in standing up for myself and our children. The real battle was just beginning. The next morning, I sat across from Ron at our kitchen table, a stack of legal documents between us. The air was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Sign them, I said, sliding the papers towards him. Ron's hand trembled as he reached for the pen. Vivian, please. Can't we talk about this? I know I messed up, but… Talk. I cut him off, my voice sharp. Like you talked to me before running off with Leanne? Or like you talked about Ada's future? He flinched, his signature faltering on the page. I was wrong about Ada.
I see that now.
And Ethan, God, I pushed him too hard. I just wanted… You wanted glory. I finished for him. You wanted to live out your failed dreams through our son. Consequences be damned. Ron's shoulders sagged. You're right. I've been a terrible father, a worse husband. But I want to make amends. Please give me another chance. I leaned forward, my eyes boring into his. A chance to what, Ron? To tear apart the life I've rebuilt? To crush Ada's newfound confidence? To push Ethan back into a world that was destroying him? No, You had your chance, I continued, my voice low and steady. You threw it away for your midlife crisis and get-rich-quick schemes. Now you'll face the consequences. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Ron's face paled as I went to answer it. 2 police officers stood on our porch. Ronald Pierce. One asked, his expression grim. Ron appeared behind me, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, that's me. You're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement. As they led Ron away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction, sadness, and most of all, relief. The battle was finally over. Inside, I found Ethan and Ada huddled together on the couch. Is Dad going to jail? Ethan asked, his voice small. I sat between them, pulling them close. Yes, honey. He made some very bad choices, and now he has to face the consequences. Are we going to be okay? Ada whispered. I kissed the top of her head. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to thrive. As we sat there, our little family unit battered but unbroken, I felt a surge of determination. Ron's actions had shattered our world, but from the pieces, we would build something stronger, something beautiful. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we'd face it together. And this time, nothing would tear us apart. 1 year later, I stood in the bustling gallery, surrounded by Ada's vibrant paintings. Her latest collection, Phoenix Rising, was the centerpiece of the exhibition, drawing admiration from art critics and casual observers alike. Mom, can you believe it? Ada whispered, her eyes shining with pride. They're actually buying my art. I squeezed her hand, my heart swelling. Of course they are, sweetheart. Your talent is undeniable. Across the room, Ethan chatted animatedly with a group of music students from the local community college. After months of therapy and soul-searching, he'd rediscovered his love for music on his own terms. Now, he was teaching guitar to kids at the community center, his passion reignited without the crushing pressure of stardom. As I watched my children flourish, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Linda, my lawyer-turned-friend. "Vivian, you've done an incredible job," she said, gesturing around the gallery. "How does it feel?" I took a deep breath, considering. "It feels
Right.
like we've finally found our footing." Linda nodded, her expression turning serious. "I heard from Ron's lawyer. He's up for parole soon." A flicker of the old anger rose in my chest, but it faded quickly. Let him try to re-enter our lives. We're stronger now. We know our worth. As if on cue, Ada called out, "Mom, Ethan, come here, please. Someone wants to meet you." We made our way through the crowd to find a distinguished-looking woman admiring Ada's centerpiece, a phoenix rising from swirling flames of blue and gold. "Mrs. Pierce," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Gabrielle Fontaine from the National Art Foundation. We'd like to offer Ada a scholarship to our summer program in Paris." Ada's jaw dropped, and Ethan whooped with joy, pulling his sister into a bear hug. As they celebrated, I felt tears prick my eyes. This was everything I'd fought for. My children, happy and thriving, pursuing their passions without fear or pressure. Later that night, as we sat around our kitchen table sharing pizza and laughter, I looked at the faces of my children. Ada, radiant with success, and Ethan, relaxed and genuinely happy for the first time in years. The empty chair where Ron once sat no longer felt like a void, but a reminder of how far we'd come. Our family had been shattered, but we'd rebuilt it stronger than ever. We'd faced betrayal, hardship, and heartbreak, but we'd emerged victorious, on our own terms. As I raised my glass in a toast, I knew that whatever challenges the future held, we would face them together, a family unbreakable, resilient, and filled with love. To us, I said, my voice thick with emotion, to new beginnings and to the incredible journey ahead. Ada and Ethan clinked their glasses against mine, their eyes shining with hope and determination. "To us," they echoed. And in that moment, I knew that we were going to be more than okay. We were going to soar.
Their minds were closed off to me, leaving me heartbroken and in an incredibly difficult situation. I was just starting my career and wasn't financially prepared to live on my own. The sudden eviction left me unprepared, both mentally and financially. At the heart of the matter was my sister, Ellie, who was 34 at the time. Despite our age gap and the natural distance it created, I never expected our relationship to turn so bitter. Ellie had been married to Noah for 5 years. They seemed happy until she suddenly accused him of having an affair with my friend, Ella. The accusation came out of nowhere. Ella, who was 26 and focused on gaining weight, had sought Noah's advice since he was a public health nutritionist. I had introduced them, never imagining the chaos that would follow. One day, Ellie came home in tears, claiming she had filed for divorce because Noah had been unfaithful with Ella for 4 months. I was shocked. Both Ella and Noah were the last people I would ever expect to be involved in an affair. Ella was a respectable woman, and Noah had always seemed devoted to Ellie. But my disbelief didn't matter. My parents immediately sided with Ellie without asking for proof, choosing to believe their daughter's word over Noah's. Things escalated quickly. Ellie blamed me for introducing Ella to Noah, accusing me of ruining her marriage. My parents, in turn, blamed me too and hastily decided to kick me out. I pleaded with them, but they refused to listen, leaving me out in the cold, literally. That night, I found myself on the sidewalk with my belongings, sobbing until a friend kindly offered me a place to stay. For years, I tried to reconnect with my family, but they shut me out completely. Then, nearly 7 years later, an unexpected email arrived. Inside was detailed evidence proving that all the accusations against Noah and me had been false. The truth had finally come to light, revealing all the misjudgments that had been made. While the revelation offered a sense of vindication, It couldn't undo the years of estrangement or the pain of being wrongfully cut off from my family. The damage to our relationships ran deep, and though reconciliation was now possible, the emotional wounds made the process difficult. The unexpected trigger for my parents' attempt to reach out after so many years came through an engagement announcement I posted on social media. Their response was not what I expected. Instead of silence, I received a message of congratulations from my parents. This simple message opened the door to a cautious, tentative reconnection. Looking back, it became clear how deeply ingrained the belief had been that I was responsible for Ellie's failed marriage. My parents, likely influenced by their close relationship with her, had cast me out without ever understanding the truth. They had called my actions disgraceful, a harsh and unwarranted judgment, considering I had no involvement in any infidelity. After throwing me out, they blocked my number and even threatened legal action if I tried to contact them. In the weeks following my eviction, I had no way to reach Ellie, Noah, or my parents to defend myself or seek clarification. Noah distanced himself as well, blocking me and moving out of his shared home with Ellie. Both of them returned to live with their parents, making it impossible for me to confront the situation directly. In a desperate attempt for answers, I reached out to Ella. Although we weren't close, I hoped she could provide some clarity. When we met, she vehemently denied any romantic relationship with Noah, explaining that their interaction had been strictly professional. She even showed me proof of her committed relationship with her longtime boyfriend, whom she was preparing to marry. Her story further confirmed the falsehood of Ellie's claims, but without concrete evidence, I couldn't present my case to my family at the time. I was left with no choice but to accept the situation. I moved on, finding my own place, focusing on my career, and slowly healing from the hurt. It wasn't easy, but I poured my energy into rebuilding my life. Years later, as I celebrated my engagement, the same event that led to my estrangement now brought a surprising opportunity for reconnection. My parents, after years of silence, reached out, offering congratulations. Though the scars of the past were still there, their message suggested a path toward healing what had been broken. As I move forward with my life, now enriched by my fiancé and the promise of a brighter future, I hold on to a cautious optimism about reconnecting with my family. The journey has been a tangled web of misunderstandings and revelations, and it was shocking to learn that the truth had been inverted all along. My sister, Ellie, had been the one unfaithful, not Noah. She had masterfully shifted the blame to him, accusing him of cheating with Ella, a claim I had once thought impossible given Noah's integrity and dedication to their marriage. The twist came when it was revealed that Ellie had been involved in an affair with my friend William, a sound engineer. William, who lived close to Ellie's home, was someone I had introduced casually, knowing they both shared a deep passion for music, but never did I expect that this simple connection would turn into a betrayal that upended our lives. The truth came to light through an anonymous email from Noah. After years of no contact, the email arrived out of the blue, triggered by my engagement announcement on Facebook. My fiancée, Olivia, had unknowingly played a key role in this turn of events by sharing our engagement online. It was this post that Noah had stumbled upon, leading him to reach out after years of silence. In a way, Olivia's decision to share our joy had inadvertently connected the dots between my past and present. Noah's email was factual and distant, filled with undeniable evidence of Ellie's affair with William, screenshots of their intimate conversations and secret plans to meet behind Noah's back. It was hard to absorb, but it answered the many questions that had haunted me for years. Ellie had not only lied about Noah's infidelity but had also manipulated everyone into believing he was the guilty party. The revelation completely shifted my perspective on everything I thought I knew. Noah explained that he had sent the email anonymously because he felt awkward about reopening old wounds. He had been blocked by me during the chaos of their divorce and had struggled with whether to reach out. Ultimately, his need to clear his name and expose the truth outweighed any discomfort. While the email didn't erase the years of pain and estrangement, it offered a much-needed sense of closure. With this new knowledge, the door to reconciling with my family finally opened. The impact of Noah's revelations wasn't just about understanding the truth but also about beginning to heal from the years of misplaced blame. Armed with clarity and a fresh chapter with my fiancé, I feel hopeful about the future, even as I navigate the fragile path of rebuilding those fractured family bonds. I felt ready to face the future with a new sense of resilience and hope. The journey ahead would involve mending relationships and rebuilding trust, but with the truth now uncovered, I felt empowered to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. It was time to clear the air and share the story they all needed to hear. For years, I had carried the burden of accusations that had never belonged to me, and the time had come to set things right. The emails, signed with Ellie's uncommon middle name, something only those closest to her knew, were undeniable proof of her deceit. For years, she had portrayed Noah as the unfaithful one, while she was the one involved in an affair with my friend William. She had twisted the truth to her advantage, gaining sympathy from our parents and positioning herself as the victim throughout her divorce. After receiving the anonymous email from Noah, I began to piece everything together. Through social media connections, thanks to my fiancée, Olivia, Noah and I reconnected. We met and talked through everything, and he explained how Ellie's lies had taken shape. He had learned about her narrative from Ella but had stayed silent, unsure how to approach me after all these years. His silence had prolonged my suffering, leaving me estranged from my family, but now that the truth had emerged, I couldn't remain distant any longer. Noah and I agreed it was time to confront the situation head-on. We arrived at my parents' house unannounced, a place I hadn't stepped foot in for over 7 years. My mom answered the door, her surprise evident as we made our way into the living room. The tension was palpable as my father and Ellie appeared. Realizing this wasn't just a casual visit, when my father threatened to call the police, I stood firm, driven by the need to expose the lies that had torn our family apart. I laid out the truth, presenting the emails that confirmed Ellie's infidelity. The room grew still as the evidence contradicted everything they had believed for years. As the reality of Ellie's betrayal settled in, the dynamic shifted. Ellie, who had relied heavily on our parents for support and sympathy, had no more excuses to hide behind. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for her but for all of us. This confrontation wasn't solely about proving who was right or wrong, it was about finding closure and healing from years of pain. I hoped that by bringing the truth to light, we might find a way to rebuild our family, even if it meant confronting the deep betrayal Ellie had caused. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I wanted to believe that this moment of truth could open a path toward reconciliation. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but standing in the home I once knew, I felt cautiously optimistic. With the full story out in the open, forgiveness seemed like a distant possibility, but it was the first step toward mending broken ties and maybe even rebuilding a more honest and open family. Since that day, Ellie has been persistently trying to contact me. It's exhausting, really, but I'm determined not to let her drama pull me back into the chaos. That day, when Noah and I confronted my parents with the truth, it was as if years of tension and lies unraveled in a single moment. We presented the evidence, Ellie's emails with William, divorce documents, and proof of her deceit. My parents were shocked, not only by the betrayal but by the revelation that Ellie had been forced to part with our grandmother's cherished diamond ring to settle the divorce, a symbol of our family's history and legacy, now lost due to her actions. As we laid everything out, Ellie tried to escape the confrontation, overwhelmed by the mounting evidence. Noah explained the situation to my parents in detail, and I filled in the gaps, recounting how I had been wrongfully cast out for years. The atmosphere was thick with betrayal and disbelief. My father, initially hesitant, demanded answers from Ellie, but as it became clear she was still weaving lies, he reached his breaking point. In a painful echo of what had happened to me years earlier, he packed up her belongings and handed her the bags, this time casting her out instead. But unlike me, it was Ellie who now found herself pleading for sympathy. The tables had turned, but this time, I felt the weight of justice, and the hope for a better future. As Noah and I left my parents' house, a sense of resolve filled me. I had finally been vindicated, but the cost was high. The family dynamic had changed forever, and while I felt a twinge of satisfaction seeing Ellie face the consequences of her actions, another part of me was simply exhausted by the drama that had consumed my life for so long. Recently, Ellie had shown up at my doorstep, a picture of desperation and tears, begging me to intervene with our parents. It was surreal to see her so unraveled, especially after she had spent years convincing everyone that I was the problem. I firmly refused to help, telling her that the debts between us had been settled. In a huff, she left a message on my door, accusing me of being vengeful. Maybe I was, but I felt justified. After everything that had happened, I had no regrets about bringing the truth to light. This entire ordeal had only solidified my decision to distance myself from her. Ellie continued to attempt contact, hoping to evoke sympathy or support, but I remained detached. The consequences of her actions, now paying her own living expenses, were hers to bear, not mine. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, I stood by my decisions. I had blocked her number once again, and any lingering guilt about her predicament had faded. It was time for me to focus on my future with Olivia, free from the shadows of the past. I hoped Ellie would find a way to rebuild her life, but it would be without my involvement. Amid the chaos of preparing for my wedding with Olivia, my parents unexpectedly reached out, wanting to reconnect after seeing our engagement announcement on Facebook. They expressed a desire to attend the wedding, doing so without even offering an apology for their past actions. It was baffling to witness their nonchalance, as if they could waltz back into my life for such a significant occasion without acknowledging the hurt they had caused. Olivia and I could only shake our heads and laugh at their messages, which seemed almost surreal in their disconnection from reality. Things escalated further when Ellie, undeterred by my previous warnings, dramatically threw herself across my car one morning, refusing to let me leave for work. I had no choice but to call the police, and she was taken away, still trying to paint herself as the victim. Despite pressing charges, I knew my parents would bail her out, and I was right. They even had the audacity to send me a lengthy text afterward, criticizing me for being too harsh and calling their betrayal an honest mistake. Their message was almost comical in its lack of self-awareness. It was as if they had forgotten the years of hurt and betrayal that had led to my estrangement, expecting forgiveness as if they had simply misplaced something rather than shattered my life. I responded firmly, reminding them that they had lost the right to dictate my actions or judge my decisions long ago. Returning from work, I found yet another message, this time inviting Olivia and me to dinner to sort things out before the wedding. They claimed they were offering both their children a second chance, as if I had been at fault in the past. Olivia and I couldn't help but laugh at their audacity. It was clear they still didn't grasp the extent of their actions or my resolve to keep them at arm's length. One last time, I wrote back, making it clear I had no interest in reconnecting or attending any dinner. I was content with my life as it had been for the past 7 years. Without them, their so-called offers of forgiveness and reconciliation meant nothing to me. With that final message, I blocked them, cutting off any further attempts at communication. Olivia was now my family, the only one I needed. My parents and Ellie had shown time and again that they were incapable of looking beyond their own needs and desires. If they tried to reach out again, they would find themselves dealing with my lawyer instead. This chapter of my life was closed, and I was looking forward to a future with Olivia, free from the shadows of the past. With each day that passed, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer bound by the weight of family drama or the expectations of others. My focus was on the life Olivia and I were building together, and it was brighter than anything I had known before. As I embraced this new beginning, I realized that sometimes, letting go is the only way to truly move forward. Not long ago, I turned 16 and immediately found myself entangled in a challenging situation with my parents regarding a trust fund my grandfather had left me, a detail I discovered only upon reaching adulthood. For much of my childhood, my grandparents were my primary caregivers. As my parents often traveled for work, my father was a PMO manager, and my mother accompanied him on his business trips, which allowed me to enjoy a stable upbringing with my grandparents. While I treasured the bond we shared, their absence during my formative years fostered a feeling of neglect that only deepened when my parents settled back in town to open a bakery but did not invite me to live with them. As a result, I stayed with my grandparents for another year. Upon turning 16, my parents demanded that I hand over my trust fund to support their business, threatening eviction if I refused. Cornered and undervalued, I chose to leave. Now, they unfairly label me as greedy when all I desire is to secure my own future, further deepening the emotional chasm between us. Despite their occasional visits during holidays and birthdays, these interactions felt more like obligations than genuine connections. They often seemed more focused on fulfilling a duty than truly engaging with me, treating our conversations with a formality that felt more appropriate for business associates than a daughter. While my grandparents provided a loving home, the emotional distance from my parents has been profoundly painful. I can't shake the feeling that they could have done more to make me feel valued in their lives. In truth, my grandparents raised me, not my parents. While my parents hold the legal title, I never felt a real connection with them. This disconnection has long been a source of heartache for me, a reality I came to understand through painful revelations. One particularly vivid memory comes from my 10th birthday. After a wonderful celebration, my parents were supposed to stay overnight at my grandparents' house, where I lived at the time. As I was heading to my room, I heard raised voices from my grandfather's office. My curiosity got the better of me, and I eavesdropped. What I heard shattered me. My grandfather was confronting my parents about their neglect. He warned them that their behavior could irreparably harm our relationship and emphasized that they wouldn't always be there, eventually leaving just the three of us. Despite no longer traveling for work, my father hadn't invited me to live with them, opting instead to let me remain with my grandparents. The conversation revealed that while my grandparents enjoyed having me, they were concerned about the strange and distant relationship I had with my parents. My grandfather insisted that my parents needed to make a greater effort to engage with me. My father's response was dismissive. He claimed I seemed happy enough with my grandparents and that he was too busy with the bakery to act as a father. My mother echoed his sentiments, expressing her own overwhelm with the business and household responsibilities. They both admitted that parenting wasn't a priority for them while establishing their bakery. That night, I cried myself to sleep, and it became my worst birthday ever. Despite the party, the painful truths I overheard haunted me. It became painfully clear that, to my parents, I was more of an obligation than a priority. This realization has lingered, shaping my perception of our relationship and confirming the emotional neglect I had always felt but struggled to articulate until that moment. The profound loss of my grandparents during the pandemic, who had been my main support system, left me devastated. My grandfather passed away first, succumbing to complications from diabetes, and just 9 months later, I lost my grandmother. Their deaths plunged me into a deep grief that felt depressive. I spent my days in a fog of sadness, barely existing as I watched TV, slept, and occasionally ate. I felt like a zombie, simply going through the motions of life. With nowhere else to turn, I reluctantly moved back in with my parents. Our already strained relationship worsened as I grappled with my grief. I found myself irrationally resenting them, wishing it had been them who had passed instead of my grandparents, a painful acknowledgement of my distress. Even with my father's successful career and the inheritance from my grandparents, my parents remained emotionally unavailable, consumed by their struggling bakery and showing little concern for my mental well-being. They didn't suggest psychiatric help, which I desperately needed, nor did they attempt to engage with me or understand my suffering. Their indifference deepened my feelings of isolation and abandonment. Living with them felt like an ongoing struggle, each day amplifying my sense of being misunderstood and neglected. The profound disconnect between us made it painfully clear that the only people who had truly cared for me were gone, leaving me trapped in an environment where my well-being seemed to matter least. This atmosphere only fueled my depression and resentment, creating a cycle of sorrow and anger. I often felt invisible to my parents, as if I could disappear, and they wouldn't notice until it was too late. It's upsetting to recount how suffocating and painful it was to live with them. However, that all began to change a couple of years ago when things slowly improved. As I started to heal from my emotional turmoil, I opened up to my friends about my strained relationship with my parents. I braced myself for judgment, but to my relief, they were incredibly supportive. My best friend since kindergarten, Ellie, was especially understanding. Not only did she offer her unwavering support, but she also shared my situation with her parents, who kindly extended an open invitation for help whenever I needed it. Their support became a lifeline that truly meant a lot to me. Over the past year, despite my parents' continued indifference, my life has improved significantly. I've learned to cope with my challenges with a little help from my friends. I decided to postpone college to gain some real-world experience. Even though most of my friends were heading off to university, I knew I had a college fund set up by my grandfather that I could access once I enrolled. However, I also needed to prove my acceptance to access those funds, as outlined by my grandparents' lawyer. Interestingly, a couple of weeks ago, their lawyer reached out to inform me about an additional trust fund set up by my grandparents that became accessible when I turned 16. This was meant to be a surprise that they would ideally share with me if they were still alive. But unfortunately, the responsibility of delivering the news fell to their lawyer. The revelation came just after my birthday, and in a moment of emotion, I decided to make a social media post expressing my gratitude toward my grandparents for always looking out for me and reflecting on how much I missed them. I thought sharing these feelings online would help me process my grief. However, I quickly regretted making such personal sentiments public. It dawned on me that some emotions are best kept private, as not every feeling needs to be shared with the world. This experience became a poignant reminder of the complex ways we navigate grief and the unexpected consequences of expressing ourselves in the digital age. I should have known better than to overshare, but after posting about my grandparents' trust fund, my parents caught wind of it, likely tipped off by a relative since neither of them is active on social media and I certainly hadn't added them. The very next day, they approached me, an unusual occurrence, as they typically only initiate conversations when it's important to them, often involving money. They began by commenting on how sweet they thought my grandfather's gesture was. Their sudden interest in my post set off alarm bells in my mind. As expected, the conversation soon turned toward their bakery business. They explained they were looking to expand but were short on funds. They suggested that dipping into my trust fund would be a simple solution. They reasoned that they couldn't bring in investors at this time because it wasn't the right moment to sell shares, and they didn't want to risk more of their own money without guaranteed returns. Essentially, they were hoping I would provide financial support without expecting anything in return, essentially a donation to their business venture. I was astounded by their audacity. How could they expect me to simply hand over the money that my grandfather had specifically set aside for my future? They weren't just asking for a small portion. They wanted access to the entire fund to funnel into their business. I firmly told them I would not partake in their plans. If they needed funds, they should seek proper business loans or find investors willing to share the risk. The money from my grandfather was designated for my education and personal growth, not to rescue them from their financial mismanagement. Their frustration mounted as I continued to resist their requests, escalating to a point where my father, visibly annoyed, presented me with an ultimatum: help fund their business or leave the house. This confrontation revealed just how far they were willing to leverage my future for their ambitions, deepening the rift between us and solidifying my resolve to protect my inheritance. My mother coldly informed me that I could either share the funds with them or leave their house, emphasizing that as an adult, they were no longer obligated to support me. The irony of their calling me selfish while they had consistently prioritized themselves over my needs was not lost on me. They framed their ultimatum as a fair choice, reflecting the real-world consequences of my decisions, but I sensed an underlying assumption that I wouldn't be able to manage without them. They couldn't have been more wrong. Despite their minimal involvement in my life, I had grown accustomed to relying on myself, and their latest demand only reinforced my determination. I didn't confront them directly after their ultimatum. Instead, I agreed to think it over, giving myself time to plan my next steps. That night, I quietly decided to leave. I had already discussed my situation with my best friend, Ellie, and her parents, who had become more like family to me than my own. They understood my predicament and offered me a place to stay for as long as I needed. Their support provided the safety net I needed to make a swift exit from my parents' home. Leaving without a word might seem harsh, but to me, it was justified. My parents had never shown me the consideration that would warrant a formal goodbye. They didn't deserve an explanation for my departure because they had never extended me the basic courtesy or care a parent should. Predictably, when they realized I was gone, they were more outraged than concerned. They bombarded me with calls, but it wasn't until the evening that I finally responded. Their questions weren't about my well-being but rather about the trust fund and what I planned to do with it. This response was disappointing but not surprising. I firmly told them I had decided against sharing my inheritance. The money was meant for my future, as my grandfather intended, not to bail them out of their financial irresponsibility. I made it clear that I would not be a charity case. It was a tough but necessary stance to protect my future and maintain my integrity. I had already made it clear to my parents that I wasn't interested in giving them handouts. They had never prioritized me, and now, without my grandparents, I needed to prioritize myself. I was certain my grandparents left me this money specifically to support myself after they passed, and knowing my parents, I decided not to help them financially. That decision was final. Since then, my parents have been stirring up trouble, accusing me of being exceptionally greedy. They've even resorted to badmouthing me to our relatives and their friends. I've been inundated with messages labeling me greedy, which has been frustrating and has led me to question my actions. Despite reassurances from Ellie and her parents that I'm doing the right thing, it's tough, and I find myself wishing for an objective perspective to reaffirm that I'm not being unreasonable. The overwhelming support from lovely comments online about my grandparents has been heartwarming, reassuring me that if my grandparents could see this, they would be proud. As for those reaching out to criticize me based solely on my parents' narrative, I realized I shouldn't take their words to heart. These people don't truly know me or my story, they're merely echoing my parents. In response, I decided to address everyone involved. I posted online that anyone who genuinely supports my parents should consider investing in their business themselves rather than pressuring me to use my trust fund. I also publicly told my parents that their attempts to guilt-trip me were only strengthening my resolve. I made it clear that they were manipulative and selfish, unable to see beyond their own needs. My parents had given me a stark choice: share my trust fund or leave. I chose to leave, asserting my independence. If there's any greed in this situation, it's not coming from me. Their strategy to make me feel guilty has failed. Instead, it has empowered me to stand firm in my decision, sever ties, and manage my life and finances without their interference. After making my feelings clear and publicly addressing those who criticized me, I decided to turn off my phone. I was done with the drama and had nothing more to add to the conversation. I was confident that those I tagged would relay my message to my parents, giving me a sense of closure as I prepared to move on to the next chapter of my life. It was time to start focusing on finding a job and an apartment. I'm deeply grateful for Ellie and her parents' generosity. They've told me I could stay with them as long as I need to, but I feel it's important to stand on my own 2 feet. I don't want to rely on others indefinitely, not after depending on my grandparents, then briefly on my parents, and now on my friend's family. With the support of my trust fund, I'm in a good position to take care of myself, and I'm optimistic about what lies ahead. It's been 4 days since I last posted online, and as expected, everyone I called out has blocked me. They've likely passed my messages on to my parents, who are furious. They sent me a message saying they were cutting ties with me, which I calmly accepted before blocking them in return. This feels like a clean break, and honestly, it's a relief to be free from that negativity. On a brighter note, my search for an apartment is going well. I found a place and will be sharing it with a roommate, which feels like a responsible move. I'm excited about this new beginning and the independence it brings. I've officially moved out of Ellie's house. It was a bittersweet goodbye, especially since she's also heading off to college soon. Now settled in my new apartment, I've also landed a job in the community manager department of an advertising agency. I'm eager to start this new role and hopeful about what the future holds. My parents and I haven't spoken in the past few weeks, and I've been too busy to dwell on past conflicts. Life is genuinely good now, and I'm focused on building a future that would make my grandparents proud. As a 17-year-old college student, I've always felt a bit disconnected from my family due to our clashing personalities and differing expectations. Even though I've worked hard to excel academically and earned a scholarship, I've never been able to gain their approval. My younger sister, the clear favorite, has always been the one to receive their praise and support. Over the years, I worked 2 part-time jobs and secured scholarships, managing to save $90,000 for my college education. This money wasn't just my financial safety net, it represented my independence and future. But my parents saw it differently. Recently, they informed me that my 22-year-old sister, who is unemployed, needed a new apartment in an upscale neighborhood. They expected me to give up my entire savings to help her, despite her lack of financial responsibility. Their demand was blunt and left no room for negotiation. They warned me that if I refused, I'd be disowned. They tried to justify this by insisting that family comes first and that I should support my sister without hesitation. I was overwhelmed by their unfairness and manipulation, initially left speechless by the weight of their demand. As I thought through my options, it became clear how wrong this was. Sacrificing my future for someone who hadn't shown the same dedication or responsibility wasn't fair. Though the idea of giving in for the sake of family peace crossed my mind, I realized I couldn't let my hard work and independence be taken so easily. Determined to protect myself, I quietly began securing my legal rights and moving my personal valuables to a friend's house, preparing for the worst-case scenario of being forced out of my family home. It was a terrifying prospect, but I knew I had to protect my future. I contacted my college's housing office to inquire about emergency accommodations. Although they didn't have immediate availability, they provided me with local resources that could help. It wasn't a complete solution, but it gave me a starting point. Armed with this information, I confronted my parents and made it clear, would not give up my savings. Their response was explosive. My father called me selfish and ungrateful, while my mother tearfully accused me of tearing the family apart over a little money. If it was so trivial, I wondered why they couldn't cover the cost themselves. My sister, Ellie, lashed out, claiming I was ruining her life by denying her happiness. The household quickly became toxic. My parents either guilt-tripped me or gave me the silent treatment. My father would make hurtful comments when I was around, and my sister acted as though I'd betrayed her. Despite the emotional manipulation, I stood firm and continued preparing to leave, quietly moving my belongings to my friend's place. Then, things escalated. I discovered my parents had tried to access my bank account to take my savings without my consent. Thankfully, I had anticipated this and already secured my funds by closing the account. When they realized their plan had failed, their anger exploded. My father accused me of destroying our family, while my mother lamented, asking how I could do this to them. I didn't back down. I told them they'd crossed a line, and if they wanted me out, I'd leave, but not a single penny of my money would go to them. To ensure my side of the story was heard, I took to social media. I posted a detailed account of what had happened, including their demand for my savings, their threats, and even their attempt to access my bank account. I shared screenshots of their messages and the bank alerts as proof, tagging family and mutual friends to make sure the truth was known. The response was overwhelming. Most people supported me, criticizing my parents and sister for their actions. Some extended family members who had been unaware of the situation reached out, offering support, though a few of my parents' friends tried to defend them. Their voices were drowned out by the wave of criticism. News of the situation spread quickly, impacting my parents' social and professional lives. My father's colleagues began distancing themselves, and his work relationships became strained, while my mother found herself increasingly ostracized from her social circles. Ellie's plans for her new apartment also fell apart when the landlord caught wind of the controversy, leaving her furious and blaming me. But by that point, I was resolute, no longer concerned with their responses as they faced the consequences of their actions. The perfect family image they had so carefully maintained was shattered, a reflection of the choices they had made. After that intense confrontation, I moved in with a close friend who offered support. Although it wasn't an ideal living situation, it was a significant improvement from the toxic environment at home. Living on my own came with challenges, but the freedom to focus on my studies and plan my future, without the looming fear of being taken advantage of, was empowering. Unsurprisingly, my parents didn't take the situation well. They bombarded me with a mix of threatening and pleading messages, urging me to delete my public post and return home. They even tried to twist the story, claiming they were only trying to help Ellie through a tough time, but the truth was already out, and my decision to cut contact remained firm. I blocked them on all platforms and even consulted a lawyer about a restraining order in case they escalated further. It was a difficult but necessary step for my peace of mind. During this time, distant relatives reached out, offering support and expressing regret for not intervening sooner. My college, upon learning of my circumstances, stepped in to provide additional financial aid, which was a tremendous relief. The entire experience forced me to grow. I became more confident, self-reliant, and my academic performance improved dramatically now that the constant stress from my family was gone. I also began forming new friendships and building a solid support network. Looking ahead, I'm determined to achieve full financial independence, and I'm seriously considering permanently severing ties with my family. The cycle of toxicity needed to end, and I was committed to breaking it. I'm focused on building a future where I no longer have to fear the next betrayal. It's been 2 months since I first shared my story publicly. I'm incredibly grateful for the support and advice I received, which helped me navigate these difficult times. After moving out and going public, my life became a whirlwind of intense emotions and confrontations. My parents and Ellie reacted badly, alternating between angry outbursts and attempts at emotional manipulation. I stuck to my no-contact policy, though it wasn't always easy. About a week after I moved out, my mother unexpectedly showed up at my friend's place. Somehow, she had found out where I was staying. She was cheerful at first, pleading for me to come home and insisting they wanted to make amends. But it didn't take long before her tone shifted, blaming me for the family's suffering and saying Ellie's life was ruined because of my actions. It became clear that nothing had changed. I told her firmly to leave, threatening to call the police if she refused. She left, but not without claiming I was breaking her heart. Things escalated when my father tried contacting my college, attempting to find out my class schedule and whereabouts. Luckily, I had already informed the administration about my situation, and they didn't disclose anything. This violation of my privacy made me furious. Meanwhile, Ellie began showing up at places she knew I frequented, like the library and the coffee shop near campus, alternating between angry rants and desperate pleas for the money. These encounters reaffirmed that cutting them off was the right decision. My focus now is on creating a life free from the shadow of their expectations, a life that's truly mine. In the aftermath of leaving home, I had to make adjustments to my daily routine for safety, sometimes asking friends to accompany me to and from classes. About a month later, my aunt, my mom's sister, reached out, saying she wanted to talk. Though I was wary, I agreed because she had always been kind to me. We met in a public place, but I quickly realized she had been sent by my parents. They were waiting nearby, hoping to confront me. Feeling betrayed, I left immediately and blocked my aunt's number as well. The battle for the narrative continued on social media, where my parents attempted to paint me as a troubled child who had stolen from them and run away. While a few people believed their story, most saw through it. It was painful to watch family, friends, and distant relatives pick sides, but I knew I had done the right thing. My decision to move on was firm, and I was ready to build a future without their control. In the midst of everything, I was thankful for those who supported me. However, Ellie escalated the situation further by starting a GoFundMe campaign, claiming she was the victim of financial abuse and needed to escape a toxic family environment. Disturbingly, she twisted the story to paint me as the abuser. It was shocking, but I wasn't about to let it slide. I hired a lawyer, who helped me get the campaign taken down. Meanwhile, my parents threatened legal action, absurdly claiming I owed them for raising me and that they had a right to my savings. It was unsettling, so I sought legal counsel. My lawyer reassured me that their claims had no merit but advised me to keep documenting everything just in case. About 5.5 months after leaving home, I received a surprising email from William, Ellie's ex-boyfriend. He apologized for not reaching out sooner and offered his support. He revealed some unsettling truths about Ellie, including how she had repeatedly cheated on him with men who showered her with gifts and luxurious trips. Even more shocking, he told me Ellie had been fired from her last job for stealing, but my parents had paid off her employer to keep it quiet and avoid charges. Learning this enraged me. It confirmed the double standard my parents upheld, protecting Ellie while demanding I sacrifice my future. 3 months after I left home, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my grandfather, my dad's father. We hadn't been close, as he lived out of state, and our interactions were rare. He'd heard about the family issues from a cousin and wanted to hear my side. Initially, I was cautious, but his concern seemed genuine. He confided that he had his own strained history with my father and apologized for not being more present in my life. He even offered financial help if I needed it. I appreciated the gesture but told him I wanted to be independent. He respected my decision but left the offer open. Talking with my grandfather sparked curiosity about other estranged family members, so I reached out to a couple of cousins on my mom's side. One of them, Megan, shared her own unpleasant experiences with my parents and Ellie. She told me about a particularly distressing incident a few years ago when, during her tough divorce, she needed temporary housing. My parents initially agreed to help, but Ellie complained, and they quickly changed their minds. Megan was evicted from their home after just 5 days and had to couch surf until she found her own place. This revelation only deepened my frustration, confirming how selfish Ellie had always been, and how my parents had enabled her behavior at the expense of others. It was disheartening to learn how poorly they had treated other family members, all while expecting me to sacrifice everything for Ellie. Meanwhile, I was still dealing with my own housing challenges. I was staying with my friend's parents, who were kind and hospitable, but I knew it couldn't be a long-term solution. I began searching for an affordable apartment near my campus, but most were way out of my budget. During this time, I bumped into one of Ellie's friends at the grocery store. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying Ellie was depressed and it was all my fault. When I asked if she knew the full story, she admitted she only knew Ellie's side. After I shared my perspective, I saw doubt creep into her expression. It wasn't a huge victory, but it felt satisfying to have my side of the story heard. The next day brought more trouble. I received a call from my bank alerting me that someone had attempted to access my new account using my social security number. The bank flagged the activity as suspicious and blocked it. I was almost certain it was my parents, shaken by their audacity. I filed a police report and froze my credit to protect my finances. It was clear they weren't going to stop, so I took further legal action. I revisited the lawyer I had previously consulted and started the process of obtaining a restraining order against my parents and Ellie. It felt drastic, but I had no choice. The day before the hearing, my mother called me in a panic, crying and begging me to reconsider. She claimed the restraining order would destroy our family. I calmly reminded her of everything they had done and ended the call. The hearing itself was tense. My parents and Ellie arrived with their lawyer, trying to portray me as an ungrateful, troubled child who had turned against a loving family. But I came prepared, armed with texts, emails, social media posts, and bank records as evidence. The judge saw through their facade and granted the restraining order. As I left the courthouse, Ellie approached me, looking disheveled and worn out. She started to apologize, but her expression quickly twisted into bitterness. She spat out that I had ruined everyone's lives. A friend stepped in to pull her away, and that was the last time I saw her. In the end, I knew I had made the right decisions to protect myself. It wasn't easy, but breaking free from my family's toxic grip allowed me to start building a future on my own terms, one free from their manipulation and control. Amid everything that was happening, I started looking for a part-time job to support myself. Juggling work and school was tough, but the sense of financial independence was incredibly empowering. That said, I won't deny that there were difficult moments, especially around the holidays, when I missed having a family, even a dysfunctional one. It's been about a year since it all unfolded, and while I'm still processing everything, I'm moving forward, thanks to the unwavering support of my friends and the kindness of others who reached out along the way. Not too long ago, I received an unexpected call from my uncle, my dad's brother, who I'd never been particularly close with. He seemed genuinely concerned and told me things had taken a turn for the worse for my parents and Ellie. Apparently, Ellie had gotten mixed up with some shady individuals and was now in serious trouble over unpaid debts. In a situation that felt almost too unbelievable, my parents, in a misguided attempt to help her, took out a second mortgage on their house to try and pay off her debts. But it wasn't enough. One night, the people Ellie owed money to showed up at my parents' house, leading to a chaotic scene that ended with the police being called and my dad in the hospital with a broken arm. Even after this, my parents continued to protect Ellie. They told the police it was a random break-in, but the truth quickly spread within the family. Shortly after the incident, my uncle reached out to fill me in on everything. Around the same time, I started receiving messages from my parents again. Against my better judgment, I unblocked them, thinking that maybe things had changed, but instead of accountability, they begged me to come home and help them, even going so far as to claim that if I had just given them the money in the first place, none of this would have happened. Their manipulation was clear, and I chose to ignore their pleas. During this chaos, I managed to save enough money to move out of my friend's place and into a more secure apartment. It was a little further from campus, but I finally had the peace of mind I'd been craving. Unfortunately, that peace didn't last long. Ellie, disregarding the restraining order, showed up at my new apartment, hysterical and begging for money, claiming her life was in danger. When I refused to help, she turned on me, accusing me of being responsible for her predicament. It was a terrifying encounter, and I immediately called my lawyer to discuss updating the restraining order to include my new address. I also informed my landlord and neighbors about the situation, just to be safe. As if that weren't enough, I later found out from other family members that my parents had been spreading rumors, claiming that I had introduced Ellie to these shady individuals and that I owed them money. Their lies caused some relatives to turn against me, and I started receiving hateful messages on social media, forcing me to block several people. Despite everything, this past year has also brought some much-needed positivity. I've made incredible friends who have become like family to me. We're even planning a celebration together, a reminder of the love and support I've found in them. Recently, I heard rumors that my parents are on the verge of losing their house to foreclosure. While a part of me feels sympathy, I also recognize that their actions led them to this point. It's a sobering reminder of how differently things could have turned out if they had respected my boundaries and treated me with fairness. As I continue moving forward, I'm deeply grateful for the support I've received. Your encouragement and solidarity have sustained me through the hardest of times, and I truly couldn't have made it this far without you all. Thank you for standing by me. My 20th birthday came with a completely unexpected gift from my dad, an international trip, something we had dreamed of for years. But this wasn't just any vacation, it held a deep, emotional meaning for me. After losing my mother when I was 7, my dad and I found comfort in watching Russian films together, a tradition born from my mom's passion for Russian cinema and culture. Those vibrant, colorful movies helped us cope with the immense loss of her sudden death from a brain aneurysm at just 36. My mom's love for Russian films was a constant presence during my childhood, and my dad had always promised that one day we'd visit Russia to honor her memory. That promise seemed like a distant hope until my birthday, when my dad revealed we were finally making the trip, just the two of us. It was our chance to reconnect and celebrate my mother's legacy, without the complications of my stepmom and stepsister. My stepsister, Ella, had finals, and my stepmom, Mila, was tied up with a big work project. While their absence seemed coincidental, I suspected my dad had planned it this way to avoid the tension that often arose between us. The announcement was a highlight of my birthday celebration, but not everyone was thrilled. After the guests left, I overheard an argument between my dad and Mila. She felt the trip should have been postponed to include everyone, meaning her and Ella. I was secretly relieved that it wasn't. Family vacations with them had always been difficult, and I feared their presence would overshadow the personal significance of this journey. But just a day before our departure, I made a shocking discovery. My passport had been destroyed. It was clear this was no accident but a deliberate act of sabotage by Mila and Ella, driven by jealousy. My dad was furious and heartbroken when he found out, struggling to process the betrayal. We're working to fix the situation, but the sting of their actions lingers. This trip was supposed to be a meaningful tribute to my mom and a chance to strengthen the bond between my dad and me. I'm still hopeful that we'll overcome this setback and fulfill our dream of visiting Russia. Mila and Ella had entered our lives 7 years ago, and at first, everything seemed fine. They were kind, and my dad seemed happy while dating Mila. But after they got married 3 years ago, everything changed. Without warning, they began treating me with rudeness and hostility whenever my dad wasn't around. While acting sweet in front of him, it was confusing and hurtful. As things worsened, I finally talked to my dad about it, leading to a family meeting. Mila and Ella denied any wrongdoing, but I had secretly recorded one of their particularly cruel conversations. Faced with the evidence, they broke down, trying to twist the situation by claiming they felt alienated because I hadn't fully accepted them. That wasn't true. I had tried, but their behavior made it impossible. My dad was torn because Mila was the first woman he had truly loved since my mom's death. He begged us to try to make it work, not wanting to be caught in the middle. For his sake, I agreed to keep the peace. Since then, Mila and Ella mostly ignored me when he wasn't around, which, while painful, was better than open conflict. We maintained this fragile truce for my dad, even though our issues were far from resolved. Their latest stunt, destroying my passport, only confirmed how far they were willing to go. This trip to Russia was meant to honor my mother's memory, and my dad had specifically wanted it to be just the two of us. Mila and Ella were angry about being left out, but given our strained relationship, it was for the best. They preferred relaxing vacations, while my dad and I wanted to explore and immerse ourselves in the culture, something we wouldn't have been able to do with them there. Ironically, they'd often taken trips without us, choosing their own getaways. The only difference this time was the destination and duration, Russia, for 15 days. Considering the significance of the trip, I thought it was a reasonable decision. In summary, while the dynamics in our blended family remain tense, my father has vowed to address these issues after our trip. For now, our priority is focusing on the upcoming journey to Russia, a long-awaited tribute to my mother's memory. As the trip drew closer, I was filled with excitement. 4 days, I had been eagerly preparing for the journey, packing my bags and organizing everything. With just a day left before departure, my spirits were high, but what should have been a moment of pure joy quickly turned into a nightmare. That evening, Mila and Ella, my stepmom and stepsister, did the unthinkable. They destroyed my passport. Around 7 p.m., while double-checking my travel documents, I realized my passport was missing. Panic set in as I tore through the house, searching every possible place it could be. After almost an hour of frantic searching, Mila and Ella walked into my room with feigned concern, asking if I had misplaced something. I hesitantly told them about the missing passport, feeling suspicious of their unusual interest. Without a hint of remorse, Mila tossed what was left of it onto my bed, a charred, mangled mess that was completely unusable. The satisfaction on their faces as they watched me process the scene was chilling. I felt a wave of shock and numbness, but I refused to let them see me break. After they left, I locked myself in my room, allowing myself a few moments to cry, overwhelmed by the betrayal. At that time, my dad was out running last-minute errands for the trip. I immediately texted him, explaining what had happened and sending him a picture of the destroyed passport. He rushed home, and as soon as he arrived, I could hear his confrontation with Mila and Ella. His anger was unmistakable as he demanded an explanation. They weakly tried to claim that the passport had accidentally caught fire from a discarded cigarette, a blatant lie, as I don't smoke. As the argument intensified downstairs, I decided to join them. My presence seemed to push my dad to make a decisive move. He retrieved a set of documents from his office and handed them to Ella. Her face turned pale as she realized what they were, her student loan papers, which my dad had agreed to co-sign for her college tuition. Without a second thought, he tore them up in front of her. The shock on her face was evident as she understood the gravity of her actions. In that moment, my father made it clear that enough was enough. He ordered Mila and Ella to leave our house. Despite their desperate pleas for forgiveness, he remained firm. Their actions had crossed an unforgivable line, and there was no turning back. The trip may have been delayed, but their punishment was swift and final. This time, they learned the hard way that their actions had consequences that would follow them far beyond the destroyed passport. After leaving the house, Ella and Mila began bombarding me with messages, pleading for forgiveness. Ella, particularly remorseful, begged me to convince my dad to reconsider co-signing her student loan, promising to make amends for what she'd done. She argued that my dad, with his stable financial standing, could manage the loan payments better than her own mother. Despite their apologies, they claimed ignorance of the consequences of their actions, insisting they felt excluded and less a part of the family. I did respond to one of their messages, reminding them that they, too, had taken many mother-daughter trips, questioning why it was unfair for me to have a similar experience with my dad, especially when it involved honoring my late mother. Ella's father was still in her life, albeit in a limited capacity, whereas I lost my mother years ago, and this trip was meant to honor her memory. It felt wrong for Ella to ask for my help after what she had done, and I believed the consequences she was facing were justified. She had no right to ask for forgiveness or favors from me. Even so, I hesitated to block her completely. A part of me felt guilty, wondering if excluding them from our 15-day trip to Russia was unfair, especially since their outings were short and local. This made me second-guess whether our decision to go without them was truly justified. Before this incident, we hadn't planned to involve the police. We didn't want to escalate a family matter to that level, though their actions were clearly malicious. As for my life, I had taken a gap year after high school to explore my interests, particularly journalism, and I was preparing to start college soon. Thankfully, my grandparents had set up a college fund for me, so financial concerns weren't an issue on my end. Unlike for Ella, whose college future was uncertain due to her parents' disagreements about who should bear the financial responsibility. Unfortunately, my dad and I had to cancel our trip to Russia since I no longer had my passport. Instead, we spent the day at home, watching old films that brought us comfort in the past. It helped lift my spirits. After reflecting deeply, influenced by my grief over my mom and the emotional weight it carried, I decided to block Ella and Mila. I realized I didn't owe them my forgiveness, and it was more important to protect my peace and focus on healing from the chaos they had caused. This experience taught me the importance of setting boundaries and not letting guilt influence my decisions, especially in family matters tainted by unresolved grief and betrayal. Since then, I have blocked Mila and Ella. They've tried to reach out several times, but I refused to respond. Their betrayal was too deep, and I won't let them think their apologies can erase the pain they caused. They need to face the consequences of their actions. Today, something significant happened. My dad came home from work and told me he had filed for divorce. This led to a much-needed conversation between us. We talked about how things had changed with Mila and Ella after the wedding and how their behavior had completely shifted. Rather than feeling like part of a family, I was treated like an outsider. My dad admitted he had been selfish, often prioritizing his own needs, but he realized staying with Mila wasn't healthy for any of us. Despite his feelings for her, it became clear that she never truly accepted me as part of her family. He suspected she felt threatened by our bond and feared she and Ella would always come second. This insecurity likely fueled their resentment and the way they treated me. He admitted that while he noticed the signs, he initially ignored them because he thought no one was getting hurt, but after the passport incident, he couldn't overlook their behavior anymore. We weren't a real family, we were just pretending. It was time to end it. He had spoken to a lawyer and officially started the divorce process. He apologized for the pain his choices had caused, and we shared a long, meaningful hug. Some might question his decision, but to me, he has always been a good father. Yes, he made mistakes, but he has done so much right by me. I've chosen to forgive him because the love and support he's given me outweigh any missteps. I love him deeply and always will. I believe Mila received the divorce papers today. My dad came home early, and he's been in his office on the phone, raising his voice a few times. I'm not sure what's happening, but I plan to check on him once he's done. Whatever is unfolding, it's another step in reshaping our lives and moving toward a more peaceful, honest future. Since my dad filed for divorce 5 days ago, I've been anxious about the fallout. Given his behavior today, I'm sure Mila was served with the papers, and that's why he's been acting out of sorts. I haven't heard from Mila or Ella since I blocked them, and they haven't tried to contact me in any other way. It's probably for the best because I still have a lot of emotions tied to everything that's happened. We had planned to go to Russia, but now that trip will have to wait until after the divorce is finalized. With college starting in a few months, I'm unsure when we'll find the time, but I'm hopeful we'll get there eventually. A few hours ago, my dad finally emerged from his office and explained why he had been yelling on the phone. Apparently, Mila had called him, threatening to make up lies to sabotage the divorce and ruin him. Her call caught him off guard while he was at work, so he hadn't managed to record her threats. However, once he got home, he was ready. He recorded their next conversation, warning her that if she tried to defame him, he would have evidence to expose her false claims. His response seemed to intimidate her. My dad believes he handled the situation well and assured me that once the divorce is over, we're definitely going to Russia. He made that promise, and I trust him to keep it. I just hope the divorce proceedings move forward without much trouble from Mila, especially since I still have proof of her and her daughter's actions against me. It's crucial they don't try to escalate things. Now, a couple of weeks after the divorce was finalized, everything feels lighter. My dad handled it brilliantly, and Mila walked away with nothing from us in the settlement, which is exactly how it should have been. We kept what was rightfully ours, and she didn't get the large settlement she had pushed for, including alimony and child support. With that behind us, my dad and I are finally preparing for our long-awaited trip to Russia. I've got my new passport, and everything is falling into place. I'm beyond excited about the trip and incredibly relieved with how things turned out. It's a fresh start, and I couldn't be happier. When I was about 9 years old, my life took a jarring turn. My parents, who had always seemed like a united front, surprised me with the announcement of their divorce. Unlike the dramatic breakups I had heard about from friends, theirs unfolded quietly and without fuss. They had already found new partners. My mom moved out with her boyfriend, while my dad's new partner moved into our home. They agreed I would spend time with both of them, as they lived just 3 miles apart. Despite their promises of new gadgets, vacations, and everything else they thought would make me happy, I felt a profound sense of loss. All I really wanted was to keep my family together under one roof. Watching my mom pack her belongings and my dad's partner settle in felt like my heart was breaking. As time passed, things became more complicated. My stepmom's twin boys, who were around my age, clearly didn't want me around, and I reciprocated their feelings. At my mom's new place, I increasingly felt like an outsider as she started her new family with her boyfriend. Eventually, I found refuge with my aunt, my father's sister and my godmother, who became a steady presence in my life. This arrangement lasted until I turned 19, when life threw me another unexpected curveball. I inherited $200 million from my grandfather, which unexpectedly drew my estranged parents back into my life. They weren't reaching out with genuine concern. Instead, they had demands for financial assistance for my half-siblings and to help cover my father's debts. I felt manipulated and used, grappling with how to respond to the sudden requests from family members who had previously shown little interest in my well-being. Navigating these complex family dynamics forced me to prioritize my emotional and financial health over the pressures of those who had once abandoned me. After a year of shuttling between my parents' homes, I finally made the decision to live with my aunt permanently. Initially, my parents were unaware that my visits had turned into a permanent move. It took them over 2 months to realize I was no longer just visiting but had settled in with my aunt. My mother assumed I was with my father, and vice versa, highlighting their lack of involvement in my life as they became absorbed in their new families. Living with my aunt was a breath of fresh air. She filled the void left by my parents with her simple acts of love, taking me out for dinners, movies, and summer vacations to my grandfather's farm. These moments brought me genuine happiness and a sense of belonging that I had longed for. My dad initially sent me a monthly allowance to support me, but over time, that became inconsistent. My aunt sometimes nudged him to remind him, but she often let it slide, not wanting to burden him. I began working at her plant nursery after school and helped with household chores like taking out the trash and running errands. Despite my aunt's care and support, it became painfully clear that my parents had drifted too far from their roles. They routinely forgot my birthdays, only making perfunctory calls when my aunt reminded them. They never visited for significant milestones, like my high school graduation. It was always my aunt who stood by me. When confronted by her about their neglect, they would offer brief apologies, but their remorse was fleeting. Over time, I grew increasingly resentful of their absence and hollow apologies. Eventually, I stopped answering their calls, which led them to accuse me of being rude. I stood my ground, unwilling to let their blame games undermine my resolve to live independently from their emotional neglect. I continued my journey, moving to university and living on my own. Though I always made it a point to visit my aunt during birthdays and holidays, I wanted her to know how much I appreciated her unwavering support. Recently, my grandfather on my father's side passed away. His death marked another chapter in my life and reminded me of the complex family dynamics I had navigated over the years. As I approached the end of my university studies, I reflected on these experiences, recognizing the profound impact of genuine care versus absence. The loss of my grandfather was a deeply sorrowful time for my aunt and me. We had been the closest to him, in stark contrast to my father and uncles, who rarely visited. Yet, they all showed up promptly at his funeral and were eager to be present for the reading of his will. To their dismay, my grandfather had bequeathed all his assets, including a 197-acre farm, the farmhouse, and $200 million in cash. To my aunt, he donated the remainder of his wealth to charity. This decision may seem harsh, but it was justified, given their prolonged absence during his illness. My aunt had been his constant companion in his final days, while I was away at university. After inheriting the property and the cash, my aunt called me home, her house, which I consider my true sanctuary. Once there, she revealed her plan to give me the $200 million my grandfather had left behind. I was overwhelmed with emotion. It wasn't just about the money but also about the depth of her love and support for me. Over the years, I had often shared my dream of starting my own business with her, and now she was making that dream a reality. Tears streamed down my face as I hugged her, grateful for her unwavering belief in me. The news of my inheritance quickly reached my parents, and their attitude toward me changed overnight. Suddenly, they were showering me with attention, professing their unconditional love, and frequently calling to check on me, but I could see through their sudden change of heart. It was clear they were more interested in the money than in me. Just last week, my dad showed up at my university dorm, which he only knew about through my aunt. He tried to reconnect, claiming pride in my upcoming graduation and suggesting a family dinner, as if nothing had ever happened. I confronted him about their long absence and the lack of genuine contact, leaving him momentarily speechless. Despite his attempts to reconcile, citing that he and my mom missed me and were sorry, I couldn't shake off the resentment. Their newfound interest felt tied to the inheritance, not out of any real love or concern for me. My mom even left a voicemail, excitedly talking about my graduation and hinting at an invitation to celebrate. She mentioned how proud they were of me for fulfilling their dream of attending university, but the thought of having them at my graduation felt undeserved and unwelcome. I confided in my aunt about my dilemma. While she suggested that reconciliation might be possible, she ultimately left the decision up to me. Now, I find myself torn. I value my aunt's guidance and recognize the potential benefits of mending familial ties, but the hurt and disappointment stemming from my parents' previous actions weigh heavily on me. I'm unsure if I can, or even want to, let them back into my life for such a significant occasion. Life has been hectic, but I have some good news. I've graduated from university and landed a job. Thank you all for your support. Now, let me address some common questions I've received. Many of you have asked about my aunt and how she was able to take me in for so many years. To clarify, my aunt is about 10 years older than my dad. When I moved in with her, she was in her late 40s and had been single for many years after her husband passed away in an accident when I was just a baby, around 2 or 3 years old. She has a daughter who left home as a teenager to attend medical school and is now an interventional cardiologist living in the US. Since then, my aunt has lived alone. Although my cousin and I have tried to encourage her to date again, she refuses, saying she finds happiness in caring for her plants. Some of you mentioned that I might have been too harsh on my parents, pointing out that they have every right to separate and find new partners. I agree, they do have the freedom to make their own choices. However, it's never acceptable to neglect your children after starting a new family, which is exactly what my parents did. When they first separated, the plan was for me to spend 1 week with each of them, but often, they acted like my presence was a burden. They would plan activities, like going out for dinner, only after I had left. Hearing them say things like, "Oh, she's here now, so we'll go out next week," felt painfully dismissive. My mom moved in with her boyfriend shortly after the separation and quickly became pregnant. Their public displays of affection were uncomfortable for me, especially since I was still just a child. Once, they took me on a 3-day trip, but instead of spending quality time together, they left me alone in the hotel room while they went sunbathing. Even when they were in the room, they would ask me to sit on the balcony outside, as if my mere presence was an inconvenience. I knew exactly what was happening inside my mom's house, and it was incredibly difficult to cope with, especially since the man she was with wasn't even my father. After a particularly disheartening visit, I decided to stop going to her place altogether. My dad was somewhat better, at least he occasionally tried to include me. However, his stepsons would often throw tantrums about my presence, causing him to postpone our plans. He'd say things like, "Let's skip this one, maybe next week father and son could go fishing," but that next week would never arrive, and I'd be back at my mom's house. Before long, I noticed a pattern. My parents seemed to have an unspoken agreement to pass me back and forth, always promising, "Let's do it next week," whenever it was convenient for them to be rid of me. The few times I did join my dad and his new family on vacation were miserable. On one trip, his wife and her sons monopolized his attention, leaving me feeling completely ignored. Even during family photo sessions, I was asked to take the pictures, ensuring I was left out of all but 4, one of me alone and one with my dad. This context might help those who thought I was too harsh on my parents understand my perspective better. Recently, my parents claimed they wanted to reconnect because they were proud of my upcoming graduation and wanted to celebrate with me. However, given their absence during my high school graduation, I was skeptical. They insisted on attending, but I didn't extend an invitation. I did, however, get extra tickets in case they decided to show up uninvited. They didn't. I kept the graduation date from them, and they completely forgot about it. It's been nearly a month since I graduated, and not once have they reached out to confirm the date. It's clear their sudden interest was merely a pretext to re-enter my life. Here's the latest update. Almost 3.5 months post-graduation, my mom called to inform me that my half-sister, Ellie, had graduated from primary school and was now enrolled in a private elementary school. She also said they were facing a shortage of funds and wanted my help. I was taken aback when my mom bluntly asked me to fund Ellie's education, stating that since my aunt had left me a $200 million inheritance, I should step up as a big brother. "Your sister needs you now," she insisted. I immediately halted her, saying, "Hold on, this is delusional. I've never even met this sister you're talking about. Where were you when I needed my mom when I was sick and alone?" Her response was tears, and she accused me of living in the past, trying to guilt-trip me by saying, "You have this huge sum of money. What better use could there be than your sister's education?" I wanted to say more, but I restrained myself and simply told her, "I have plans for that money, and I can't spare any for anyone else." She abruptly ended the call, not even asking about my graduation day. It became clear that their sudden interest was purely financial. Just when I thought I'd heard it all, I received a call from a bank about a defaulted mortgage my dad was responsible for. They had gotten my number from him after he had taken out a personal loan and fallen behind on payments. Initially, I panicked, unsure of my legal responsibilities. Instead of confronting my dad, I reached out to a friend who was finishing law school. Though he wasn't yet a lawyer, he was knowledgeable about legal matters and reassured me that I had no obligation to pay my dad's debts. The bank's recovery agent had contacted me because they could ask anyone they thought might pay, but I had every right to refuse. When the bank called again, their recovery agent used an assertive tone, trying to intimidate me into paying. This time, I was prepared. "Who gave you the right to speak to me like this? I'm not responsible for this debt. Contact the person who is." They apologized and hung up. A couple of hours later, my dad's wife called. Furious, I can't bring myself to call her my mom or even stepmom. She was enraged that I refused to cover the debt, but I stood my ground. I'd learned that I needed to protect my boundaries and financial security, regardless of the pressure they tried to put on me. When the debt recovery officers got aggressive with my dad, demanding he pay the mortgage or face severe consequences, I was pulled into the drama. His wife called again, shouting at me, "Your father is struggling to pay the mortgage, and you just turn away, even though you have the means to help." I replied coldly, "I have no obligation to help because he never prioritized me. He always chose you and your boys over me. Why don't you all help him out?" She abruptly ended the call. That same night, my dad called me, drunk and emotional, not angry, but full of apologies. He admitted he hadn't treated me right, especially in front of his stepsons, and expressed deep regret for his past actions. Despite his remorse, I told him I didn't want to dredge up the past, nor did I want them back in my life. He pleaded for my forgiveness, but I explained that apologies and regret couldn't undo the years of neglect. I had learned to live without their influence, and I preferred to keep it that way. After hanging up, I couldn't help but wonder if denying him financial help was the right decision. I felt a pang of guilt knowing he was being pursued by the bank. Part of me suspected that this plea for help might be another tactic to manipulate me emotionally into giving money. If he had asked directly, I would have refused, just as I did with my mom. What do you all think? Should I have helped with a few months of his mortgage payments? Some of you suggested it wouldn't have been too much of a burden for me to cover his mortgage for a couple of months. I considered my dad's situation and felt a pang of remorse, teetering on the edge of calling him to find out how much he needed. But before I could make that call, I received an email from my mom. She apologized for missing my graduation and invited me to dinner with her and my dad, promising a return to the old times, just the four of us. Although I wasn't enthusiastic about revisiting memories of our past family life, I accepted the invitation. I wanted to bring an end to this ongoing saga. At dinner, they repeated the same sentiments my dad had shared over the phone: apologies, expressions of remorse, and discussions about forgiveness, all in the hopes of mending our relationship. The atmosphere felt charged with unspoken intentions until, out of nowhere, my mom asked, "Baby, we were wondering what plans you have for your inheritance money." She quickly added, "No, I mean, your dad and I could offer you some good investment advice. You're pretty young to handle such decisions on your own." I responded nonchalantly, "Thanks, but I've already got someone advising me on that, so I'm good." The table fell silent for a few minutes. Then my mom tried a different angle. "You know, your dad has been having a hard time because he defaulted on the mortgage," she ventured. "I know," I replied, turning to my dad, "but why did you take that personal loan? Was it for business?" He looked down, ashamed, and muttered that it was for his son's college tuition. Before I could process that, my mom interjected, "It doesn't matter what it was for. The point is, your dad's in trouble, and we need to help him. Why don't you clear his mortgage, and his stepson can pay you back when he gets a job, and the rest of the money you could give to me. Remember, Ellie needs to go to a private school. She'll pay you back when she's older and earning." Feeling the absurdity of the conversation peak, I replied, "How about we just eat our dinner silently and call it a night?" That sarcastic comeback did not sit well with her. She lost her temper and yelled, accusing me of still being that self-centered brat who only cared about himself. I retorted, "Yes, that's exactly who I am." I was ready to end the charade. I could have lectured them about their selfish behavior, especially since they knew I had my own student loans to pay off. Yet here they were, expecting me to finance my stepbrother's education and Ellie's private schooling while managing my own debts. "I'm done with you guys," I declared firmly. "It's clear you only wanted me back in your lives for the money, and you know what? You can forget about it because you're not getting a penny from me. I stood up from the table, left enough cash to cover my portion of the dinner bill, and walked out without looking back. 3 years ago, my father stepped down as COO of the research firm he founded. For nearly 7 years, he had assured me that I would take over his role. So, it was a shocking blow when, during the retirement party I had meticulously organized, he unexpectedly named my brother-in-law, William, as his successor. This decision blindsided me. I had devoted 7 years to the company, while William, just 29 and married to my sister for 3 years, had only been involved for about a year. Although I respected William and recognized his contributions, I felt utterly devastated and unjustly overlooked. When I confronted my father in private, he justified his choice by claiming that William displayed more of the leadership qualities he valued. He believed William would be a better steward for the company's future. My father's doubts about my potential stemmed from a family dinner months earlier, where I had inadvertently revealed my struggle with generalized anxiety disorder by accidentally dropping my prescribed medication. While my mother responded with compassion, my father was less understanding. To him, mental strength was paramount, and he began to question my leadership abilities because of my anxiety. Despite my reassurances that my condition had never interfered with my work, he accused me of using it as an excuse, concluding that William, with his perceived resilience and qualities reminiscent of his own, was the superior choice for COO. This decision profoundly impacted my respect for my father and irreparably altered our relationship. He told me I was welcome to leave the company if I wished, making it clear that he lacked faith in my ability to lead. The realization hit me hard during his retirement party, prompting me to leave early and cut ties with him. The pain lingered. He had chosen someone else for a position I had been promised, seemingly influenced by his perception of my anxiety as a weakness. In response, I resigned and quickly sought a new job. Tensions escalated when my sister accused me of attacking her personally with my angry resignation over the COO decision, resulting in a rift between us. Over the past 4 years, communication with my family has dwindled. I occasionally meet with my mother, who implores me to reconcile with my father, but I remain uninterested. Recently, she frantically informed me that the new COO, William, had been arrested for tax fraud, implicating my father due to their connection. She urged me to reconnect with my father, possibly to testify on his behalf, but I flatly refused. The risk of being embroiled in a fraud investigation that might involve other executives was too high. I told my mother that if my father genuinely needed my help, he should reach out himself. I believed maintaining my distance from the company's turmoil was in my best interest. My mother accused me of being childish and insisted that I should speak to my father to mend fences, emphasizing the need for family unity in tough times. I found her demands unreasonable and remained firm in my decision not to contact him, which only upset her further. She called me selfish and heartless, criticizing me for holding on to past grievances. Her comments stung, especially since I felt she would struggle to forgive if she were in my position, overlooked for a COO position I had worked hard for. It felt unjust to expect forgiveness when my father hadn't even acknowledged the pain he caused. Our conversation devolved into a heated argument, and in a moment of bitterness, I remarked that the troubles befalling him and William were karma for how they had treated me. After a tense silence, my mother hung up, and I later discovered she had blocked me. I felt isolated and regretful about my harsh words, contemplating calling her back but realizing she had made that impossible. It's been weeks since she blocked me, leaving me cut off not only from her but from any familial support. Although my friends have been supportive, losing my last familial connection has been difficult. Despite the fallout, I believe I was right to point out that the current situation could be a consequence of their actions. My anxiety disorder, which my father blamed for my supposed inadequacies, does not hinder my leadership or work abilities. His words at the retirement party left a deep impression, shaping my feelings and actions ever since. For the last 3 years, my father's outdated views on mental health have severely affected my self-esteem, leaving me to question my decisions and feel like an imposter at my new job. It took significant time and therapy to begin addressing these unresolved issues, yet my performance at work remains strong, and I'm even being considered for a promotion. I believe my father made a grave mistake, and it's disappointing that my mother can't recognize that. She seems more focused on defending him than acknowledging the hurt inflicted upon me. I've made it clear that I won't be the one to initiate reconciliation. They must genuinely apologize for their actions before I even consider reconnecting with the family. Recently, my sister visited, clearly distressed over her husband's legal troubles involving a federal crime. Despite the tension, I couldn't turn her away and tried to offer emotional support. She was unaware of the issues until they escalated and expressed a desperate hope that I could use my workplace connections to help. She mentioned that my boss's spouse is a court reporter, suggesting I could leverage that relationship for assistance, even offering to pay for any help. I found her request inappropriate and firmly declined. I explained that I couldn't involve my employers or their connections in such matters, nor did I want to compromise my professional standing or moral principles. I had hoped she visited for emotional support, not to seek favors, and her request underscored how misaligned our values had become. When my sister approached me for help regarding William's tax fraud situation, I made it clear that, while I held no personal animosity toward him, I couldn't get involved in any legal manipulations. My decision was purely pragmatic. I didn't want to risk becoming entangled in a situation that could jeopardize my own position. I was open to offering emotional support, but that was the limit of my involvement. Despite my reasoning, my sister took my refusal hard. She accused me of harboring a grudge against her husband for taking the position I had hoped for at the company. I tried to explain that my feelings were more about the situation itself rather than personal resentment toward William. Sure, I might have felt a hint of resentment, but it wasn't a grudge. To me, William wasn't significant enough to warrant such feelings. Unfortunately, my attempts to clarify fell on deaf ears. My sister persisted, calling me petty and selfish, a sentiment that seemed to mirror what our mother had said. This led to a heated argument, and I finally asked her to leave my home. It was especially frustrating because during my own challenges, she hadn't offered the support I had hoped for. I was willing to extend my sister the benefit of the doubt. Her actions seemed to follow a long pattern of taking personal digs at me whenever things didn't go her way. The argument escalated quickly, with both of us raising our voices until we were shouting over each other, unable to comprehend what the other was saying. Eventually, she stormed out, leaving me deeply upset. Reflecting on the situation, I felt a profound regret for maintaining contact with my family over the past 3 years, wishing I had distanced myself sooner. This ongoing turmoil made me question the sincerity of the relationships I had. It seemed the support I thought I had from my mother was superficial. The realization that I had possibly wasted years trying to maintain a connection that was ultimately detrimental was painful, reinforcing the notion that distancing myself might have been the better choice from the start. Even after my sister's hysterical behavior and the exhausting fallout, I found it incredibly hard to completely sever ties with my family. Memories of our childhood bond tugged at my heart, making it even more painful to think about our current strained relationships. It was disheartening, and I often wished it could all just be resolved. For days passed in silence after my sister's dramatic visit, leaving me to think perhaps my family had finally decided to leave me alone. However, today my parents showed up unexpectedly, determined not to repeat the same mistake I made with my sister. I initially refused to let them in. I told them through the door that I saw no point in rehashing old arguments or wasting more time. To my surprise, my father wasn't there to ask for help but to apologize. He admitted he had made significant mistakes and, although he knew his apology couldn't undo the past, he wanted to express his remorse. This caught me off guard. I hadn't expected him to acknowledge his actions, especially since the last time we spoke was the night he openly called me a disappointment at his retirement party. I listened as he apologized, and while I appreciated his effort, I explained that forgiveness wasn't something I could easily offer. The pain from the past 3 years, combined with his prolonged silence, couldn't simply be erased by his sudden acknowledgement of guilt. I told him I needed time to process everything and that I couldn't guarantee forgiveness. It wasn't just the initial betrayal that hurt but also the long period it took for him to recognize and address his wrongdoings. When he finished his apology, I braced myself for anger or an outburst, but instead, he expressed his willingness to give me all the time I needed, accepting that I might never want to rebuild our relationship. This moment was a significant turning point, revealing the complexities of family dynamics and the slow, often painful journey toward potential reconciliation. Even with his readiness to wait, the deep scars of the past made it clear that any path forward would be fraught with challenges. As we stood outside my door, my father shared a revelation about the past 3 years. He admitted that his decision was not just a mistake but a deeply misguided one, influenced by outdated notions of mental toughness passed down from his father. He confessed that the men in his family were taught to view emotional struggles, like anxiety, as signs of weakness, excuses for not meeting life's demands. When he discovered I was taking anti-anxiety medication, his fear of the business failing clouded his judgment, leading him to doubt my capability to lead. After our fallout, he harbored resentment towards me but eventually began to question his beliefs as he learned more about anxiety and even recognized some symptoms in himself. He had been contemplating reaching out to me when the scandal with William erupted, delaying his plans. Hearing all this left me feeling conflicted. While his apology didn't erase the pain of the past 3 years, it was a step toward understanding. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet and was still processing whether his remorse was genuine, but I was open to considering reconciliation. I asked him to return home, saying I would reach out if and when I was ready. He respected my wishes and left. During our conversation, my mother also apologized for her part in the misunderstandings and the quick judgments she had made. She mentioned that she had spoken to my sister, who, she said, also regretted her actions and wanted to apologize on her behalf. However, I felt that if my sister truly wanted to apologize, she should do it herself. Her current situation with William, while stressful, didn't excuse her past behavior toward me. Now, with most of my family having offered apologies, I was left with a lot to ponder. This unexpected wave of contrition from my family was overwhelming, and I needed time to decide how, or if, I wanted to move forward with each of them. Deciding whether to accept my family's apologies was one of the toughest choices I faced. For 3 years, I had lived without any real contact with them, except for my mother, and even our relationship had been strained. On one hand, I felt tempted to forgive and move past everything, eager to stop the constant replay of hurtful events in my mind. I didn't want to be held back by lingering resentment. On the other hand, I was unsure if forgiving them was the right decision or if it merely allowed them to escape accountability. The complexity of my feelings was compounded by my deep-seated longing for family connections. Despite everything, I missed them terribly, which only added to my confusion. I made it clear that I wouldn't assist my family with their current troubles, standing firm on my principles. This stance wasn't about whether they expected my help, it was about maintaining my integrity. I decided to take some time to reflect. If their apologies were genuine and not just a desperate attempt to draw me back in during a crisis, it could mean the possibility of mending our fractured relationships. Fast forward 4 months, and I've been busy with new developments in my life. Eventually, my sister, having dealt with her own issues with William, apologized in person. I gave her the same response I had given our parents, would consider reconciliation, but it would be on my terms. After much thought, I agreed to slowly rebuild our relationship, starting with monthly dinners. The first dinner was awkward, but their efforts to mend our bond were evident. My father even offered me the COO position at the family business, which I declined. For now, I need more time to decide if I want to take on such a responsibility. Amidst all this, there's been a bright spot. I've started dating a longtime friend. She's been the one who encouraged me to give my family a second chance. Our relationship has brought a lot of joy and new energy into my life, helping me balance the ongoing dynamics with personal happiness. So far, things are looking up, and I'm content with where I am. At 16, I found myself trapped in a difficult situation when my parents pressured me to hand over a $117,000 inheritance from my grandmother to my older sister, Mia, who is 6 years older than me. Mia had always made my life harder, constantly bullying me in ways our parents dismissed as normal sibling rivalry. They often said I was just being too sensitive, brushing off my feelings. This disregard for my well-being was painfully evident a few years back during a family beach trip when I was 11. Mia and her friends, who shared her dislike for me, pulled a cruel prank by shoving a plastic bag over my head and pushing me into the water.
I struggled to free myself and swim to safety.
Terrified, but when I told my family, they laughed it off as a harmless joke, leaving me feeling unheard and unprotected.
Years later,
the culmination of these experiences, especially being forced to give up my inheritance to fund Mia's business, left me feeling betrayed and alone. Mia recently sent me photos of her successful store launch, seemingly to rub it in. The sight of her celebrating with my money only deepened the hurt. I resolved to focus on my education, get into a good college, and distance myself from the toxic dynamics of my family. My goal was to build a future where trust and respect would shape my relationships, unlike what I had endured at home. About a year ago, my grandmother, my dad's mother, passed away, and a few months ago, we finally settled her estate, while she left most of her assets, including her home, to my parents. Mia and I each inherited $177,000. My grandmother also left me a sapphire ring that I had admired as a child. Fortunately,
My parents didn't recognize its true value.
so it remained mine. My plan was to save my inheritance for the future, but my parents had other ideas. Mia was starting her own business and needed financial support. They were already contributing, and they expected me to do the same. Despite my protests, especially given Mia's long history of cruelty toward me, the pressure kept mounting. My dad eventually gave me an ultimatum: either I support Mia, or he wouldn't pay for my college or let me live at home. Wanting peace to focus on my finals, I reluctantly gave in, handing over the $117,000. 3 months later,
I had been accepted into the college of my choice.
and my parents agreed to cover my tuition and living expenses since I'd be attending out of state. While it seemed like sacrificing the inheritance was a practical compromise, I still felt uneasy about the whole situation. Recently, Mia hosted a launch party for her store, which was focused on revolutionary clothes and accessories.
According to her and her friends, the same ones who had tormented me during the beach incident.
I wasn't invited to the party, which my parents excused as adults only, though it felt like another way to exclude me. The next day, Mia sent me a bunch of photos from the event, thanking me with a smug grin for my $117,000 contribution, which she claimed made the party possible. As frustrating as it was to see her gloating, what caught my attention was one familiar face in the photos: her high school ex-boyfriend, John. He had gained some weight and grown stubble, but it was definitely him. Mia had started dating John when she was 19, and he was 22, something our parents initially disapproved of because of the age gap and John's reputation. Despite their objections, Mia secretly continued seeing him.
John had a shady past,
including an attempt to steal from his father's company,
which led to their breakup after just 8 months.
He eventually moved to Wyoming to work on his uncle's farm, and Mia was devastated. She even begged our dad to help John find a job locally so they could stay together. But Dad refused, demanding that Mia cut all ties with him. That day was filled with chaos, Mia pleading,
Dad furious,
Mom crying, and through it all, I was told to stay in my room, away from the drama. Even though I wasn't involved in the serious family discussions, I was always around to overhear the conversations about Mia's business. My parents and Mia seemed to forget I was there, openly discussing her struggles to secure financial backing for her shoe and accessory store.
Many of her friends' parents were hesitant to invest,
with one mother, who was a single parent, particularly reluctant. She didn't want to risk her savings on what she considered a shaky business and wanted her daughter to gain more work experience before diving into entrepreneurship. However, she had tentatively agreed to invest later if the store proved successful in its initial months. As I watch Mia's life unfold with the backing of my money, I'm left wondering about the true cost of family obligations and the price I've paid for peace.
knowing that the business was financially precarious and barely able to survive its first few months without more funding.
I realized how vulnerable their situation truly was. The sight of John, Mia's questionable ex, in the background of the launch party photos sparked an idea. Given the already fragile confidence of the credit analyst, any association with someone like John could tip the scales against them. Using a fake social media account, I contacted the hesitant credit analyst's mother, making sure to use Facebook's call feature to keep my identity hidden. After some initial hesitation, curiosity got the better of her, and she reached out. During our conversation, I explained who John was and detailed his dubious past, emphasizing the risks associated with the business's current connections. At first,
she was skeptical,
but her attitude shifted once I sent her old photos of Mia and John, which supported my claims. I made it clear that my intention was purely to inform her, leaving the decision to invest in her daughter's venture entirely in her hands. Once I provided all the necessary information, I ended the call,
allowing her to mull over the implications for her potential investment.
It seems she made a difficult choice, opting out of the commitment and advising her daughter to do the same. Since I contacted her, the situation has escalated, and no one suspects my involvement. I've been the catalyst in this whole mess, but it's Mia who's been urgently reaching out to our parents, hoping they might persuade our mother to reconsider her decision. Her friends are also upset, They feel betrayed that she kept such significant news from them, complicating matters. Mia recently reunited with John but kept his true identity a secret, which didn't sit well with our parents and everyone else. Now, she's caught in a tough spot, with friends and family distancing themselves from her, all upset by her actions. Part of me feels a twisted satisfaction seeing her struggle, especially considering how she tormented me during our childhood. But in truth, I find no joy in her distress, watching the fallout unfold.
Especially since the business meant so much to her.
Makes me question if my actions were too vindictive. I overheard our parents discussing their disappointment. They're so upset that they're even considering pulling their investment from her business over this broken trust. It's rare for them to be this angry with her, marking a significant shift in their dynamic. Amid this turmoil, I've been reflecting on whether I should feel guilty for influencing a potential credit analyst to withdraw, triggered by past grievances. I appreciated everyone's responses to my post. They've convinced me to stay quiet about my involvement. If our parents ever found out, I'd likely be kicked out, especially now that I'm almost 19 and dependent on them for college funding. A week has passed since my last update, and Mia's situation has only worsened. The credit analyst's withdrawal led her daughter to do the same, putting Mia and her business in jeopardy. One of her friends is now demanding a larger share of the business, 70-50, after losing faith in Mia over the secret involving John. This friend discovered that John had stolen from his father's company, and despite Mia's attempts to maintain her fabricated story, no one believes her. She even claimed that the revealing photos were doctored, but this excuse has done little to spare her from our parents' daily reprimands. They're disappointed, yet they continue to support her, meeting with their lawyer each evening to navigate the crisis. Mia could end up losing shares in her business, and there's a real risk they might shut it down due to unresolved conflicts.
I've decided to stop fixating on these outcomes.
Interestingly, Mia's troubles have shifted the focus away from me, granting me newfound freedom. I've been relishing this anonymity, especially as I savor my last few weeks at home before college. With everyone preoccupied, I can come and go without being noticed. Whether I'm spending nights at a friend's house or just out late, no one seems to mind or even notice.
This has been the silver lining amidst all the chaos, providing me with space and peace.
However, I can't shake the worry that this family drama might impact my parents' willingness to finance my college education, a concern I hadn't fully appreciated until now. If it does affect their decision, it could complicate things for me.
Although it seems Mia is facing far harsher consequences.
3 weeks after my initial post, just when I thought I was out of the woods, the situation escalated again. The woman I had contacted buckled under pressure and indirectly revealed my involvement to Mia. She told Mia about an anonymous call and the photos she received, leading Mia straight back to me. Just yesterday, I had a heated encounter with Mia as I was about to leave the house. She confronted me, accusing me of sabotaging her, and pushed past me. I reacted defensively, and the situation escalated quickly. Now I'm worried about the repercussions of my actions, especially since she's vowed to retaliate. The entire situation has spiraled into a tangled mess, and I find myself caught in the middle, questioning whether my earlier actions were worth the chaos they've caused. Despite the panic swirling inside me during the confrontation,
I managed to maintain a composed demeanor,
vehemently denying any involvement in her accusations. I insisted that I barely knew her friend's parents, having only met them briefly at a lunch before their store opened. My denial was forceful, my voice steady.
Even though I was fabricating every word.
The argument escalated, our voices rising until our parents stepped in to separate us. But Mia was relentless. Convinced I had sabotaged her business prospects, she demanded to search through my phone and laptop. I resisted, not because I had something to hide, but because agreeing too easily would look suspicious. Thankfully,
I had erased all traces from my devices that could link me to the anonymous call.
Mia assumed I had used my personal number, unaware of the disposable Facebook account I had created and deleted after reaching out to her friend's mother. Even after a thorough search of my social media and devices turned up nothing, Mia's frustration only intensified. She accused me of deliberately wiping my devices to cover my tracks. I countered that her paranoia was unfounded and it was unfair to lash out at me just because her business was at risk. Eventually, the situation calmed, and Mia, overwhelmed, broke down in tears. I thought the worst was behind me, but then my parents pulled me aside for a serious talk. They admitted they found no evidence to support Mia's claims, yet they still believed her, convinced that no one else could have known the details necessary to make those calls. My heart sank as they concluded that it must be me, especially since I had previously voiced my frustrations about Mia's treatment of me. To my dismay, they decided to withdraw their financial support for my college education, leaving me to fend for myself. They were resolute. They didn't want to argue any further. They had made up their minds. Desperate, I began yelling and crying, hoping to evoke some sympathy or reconsideration, but it was futile. Unlike the emotional outbursts Mia displayed, my pleas were met with indifference. After a harrowing half-hour of fruitless pleading, I retreated to my room, realizing just how isolated I was in this family conflict. Overwhelmed, I found myself holding onto the sapphire ring my grandmother left me, a potential lifeline that could fund my first semester if I chose to sell it. However, I wasn't sure it would cover all 3 years.
So I started considering taking out a student loan and asking a family member to co-sign.
With the college payment deadline looming just weeks away, I knew I couldn't afford to leave anything to chance. Since my last life update a month ago, a few days after my parents decided against financing my education, I realized I had no reason to stay or maintain contact with them. I packed my bags and moved in with a friend whose family welcomed me with open arms. My friend, planning to take a gap year to work in her dad's business, had no intention of using her college fund. Her parents, who had known me for years and considered me like a daughter, generously offered to allocate it for my education.
Though initially hesitant,
I accepted their kindness, promising myself to repay them one day. Now I'm on campus, thankfully without needing to sell my grandmother's ring, and I'm deeply grateful for the support from my friend and her family. As for Mia, her situation only worsened. She ultimately sold her shares in the business,
which are now entirely owned by her former partners.
She had to step away from the venture she had started, as trust had eroded beyond repair. Although she might be upset about the outcome, it was necessary, and my parents were powerless to change it. The future of the store seems uncertain, but that's no longer my concern. With no ties left to my family or to Mia, I'm fully focused on my own future, thankful for the unexpected support I've received and the new path I'm forging in college. My older sister, Mia,
26,
has always struggled to accept my happiness, harboring a jealousy for a life she believed I didn't deserve. Despite her beauty and intelligence, Mia's life spiraled after she dropped out of college to marry a wealthy man, only to be left when he discovered her true nature. Now divorced and unemployed, she lives with our parents. Growing up, Mia was the family's golden child, basking in praise while I often felt overlooked and inadequate. Her relentless teasing during our childhood only deepened my insecurities, with hurtful remarks about my likability echoing in my mind.
Whenever I tried to express my feelings,
our parents dismissed my concerns, seemingly oblivious to her manipulative behavior.
As we matured,
Mia's narcissism became increasingly apparent. She engaged in petty sabotage, like ruining my school projects and sending embarrassing photos from my phone to my friends, all in a bid to maintain her position of superiority at home. Despite occasional scoldings from Dad, Mia faced no real consequences for her actions, which only fueled her behavior. After high school, my fortunes began to shift. I worked diligently, got accepted into my dream college, and eventually landed a fulfilling job. It was there that I met Mark, a wonderful man who soon became my partner. Our relationship blossomed, filled with travel and adventure, but I hesitated to introduce him to my family due to Mia's unpredictable nature. As our wedding approached, my worst fears came true. Mia made a move on Mark, and the incident was caught on camera, finally revealing her manipulative tendencies to everyone, including our parents. Shocked by her behavior, they could no longer ignore the truth and confronted her, leading to her disownment. This painful revelation, while difficult, brought a sense of relief. It marked a turning point where I could finally step out from under Mia's shadow and embrace a life with Mark, free from the turmoil that had plagued me for years. Even as my relationship with Mark flourished, I could no longer delay introducing him to my family. After dating for a year and a half, Mark began to question my reluctance, so I spoke with Dad, who was excited to meet someone he deemed worthy of me. He promptly invited us over for dinner. While I felt thrilled, I was also anxious about Mia's disruptive tendencies. Knowing the dynamics of my family, I had a thorough discussion with Mark about what to expect. He was understanding, assuring me that he would handle whatever might arise. A few days later, Mia unexpectedly called me, a rare occurrence, as she never reached out first. She seemed unnaturally curious about Mark and our plans to visit home, likely prompted by our mom, who had mentioned my serious relationship. Her sudden warmth felt strategic, raising alarms about her intentions. I found myself questioning whether introducing Mark to Mia was worth the risk or if it would be safer to have my parents visit us instead. Reflecting on Mia's history, it was easy to see why I was cautious. Her academic prowess had always been overshadowed by her obsession with appearance. During her college years, she met William,
a wealthy man,
and quickly prioritized him over her studies. While I was preparing for my college entrance exams, Mia cruelly claimed I would never get into my dream school. Yet when I did, and our parents celebrated my achievement, Mia impulsively announced her engagement to William at my celebration party, stealing the spotlight. Despite William's obvious surprise, Mia flaunted the lavish gifts he gave her, taunting me by claiming I would never attract someone wealthy because of my looks.
Her materialistic views clashed sharply with my values.
I believed in independence, not relying on someone else's wealth. Shortly after, Mia and William had a grand wedding, primarily funded by him, with my dad covering some costs out of formality. Their marriage crumbled 5 years later when Mia revealed she didn't want children, a detail she had never shared with William. During college, I distanced myself, returning home only during holidays when Mia was usually away with William. Given these experiences, my worries about introducing Mark to this volatile family dynamic felt well-founded. Friends and the broader community emphasized the need for careful handling of the situation, a task I was determined to manage with grace and caution. William had always desired to be a father, feeling misled by Mia, who had never been upfront about her reluctance. He shared troubling stories of Mia's frequent partying, her flirty behavior with other men at bars, and her obsession with his wealth rather than emotional connection. He even showed me videos of her inappropriate behavior during nights out, reinforcing his relief at their separation. Despite his grievances, my parents blamed him for pressuring her about children while ignoring her problematic actions. After the divorce, Mia moved back in with our parents, with no degree or job prospects after dropping out of college for William. She feigned trauma from the split, only to quickly return to a life of clubbing and casual relationships, flaunting her escapades on Instagram. 2 years into my career, I secured a new job that significantly improved my financial situation, much to my parents' delight. During a celebratory dinner at home, Mia returned looking disheveled and partially intoxicated. This upset my dad, who expressed his disappointment in Mia for not pursuing her education and career like I had. He pointed out her financial dependency on them, prompting my mom to caution him against making such remarks. Mia overheard this and stormed off in a huff. This moment served as a wake-up call for my dad, who recognized how indulged Mia had become. He urged my mom to encourage Mia to take responsibility for her life. That evening, Mia confronted me, attempting to belittle me by mocking my appearance and insisting I could never measure up to her, regardless of my financial success. Instead of feeling hurt by her words, I laughed them off and suggested she needed to reevaluate her attitude. This only fueled Mia's anger, and she demanded I leave the house. I reminded her that it was our parents' home, not hers to control. The next day, as I prepared to leave, I discovered that 3 of my dresses had been deliberately damaged. I showed them to my parents, exposing Mia's latest act of spite. My dad was furious and confronted Mia, but my mom attempted to downplay the situation, arguing that Mia was just acting out of shock. Frustrated, my dad had had enough. He sternly warned Mia that he could no longer financially support her or tolerate her destructive behavior. This confrontation deepened Mia's resentment towards me, creating a noticeable rift in our already strained relationship. Having endured Mia's relentless hostility, I initially tried to ignore her antics, but things escalated when she began making advances toward my boyfriend, Mark. After much contemplation and discussion with him, we decided it was necessary for Mark to meet my family, including Mia. A friend of mine suggested it would be better to see how Mark would handle the situation sooner rather than later. When we arrived at my parents' house, Mia's behavior was painfully transparent. She had dyed her hair black and dressed excessively, clearly trying to impress Mark as if it were a date. During introductions, she forcefully greeted Mark with an overly enthusiastic hug, ignoring the discomfort of everyone else in the room.
At dinner,
She made every effort to insert herself into our conversation, claiming to share Mark's interests and exaggerating their compatibility.
Complete with suggestive links.
It was painfully obvious to everyone,
including a visibly uncomfortable Mark,
that she was trying far too hard. Later, when I took a moment to shower, she seized the opportunity to ask Mark for help finding her phone, a thinly veiled excuse to get his number. Mia even resorted to sharing her sob stories about her divorce, attempting to elicit sympathy from Mark, while our mother joined in to criticize William, Mia's ex. When Mark suggested we take a walk around the neighborhood, Mia quickly volunteered to join us, only to be awkwardly rebuffed as Mark clarified he wanted some alone time with me. Embarrassed, she retreated. Since that visit, I've been bracing myself for more of Mia's schemes to win over Mark, despite my fears.
I trust him and am curious to see how he will handle her continued advances.
Shortly after our visit, Mark proposed during a trip, and of course, I was ecstatic. Even after our engagement, Mia refused to back down. She started sending Mark a barrage of cat videos, a peculiar strategy given her known indifference to cats. To further this new facade, she even adopted a cat. At first, Mark shared her messages with me, showcasing her attempts to appear caring and involved. However, after a while, he stopped mentioning them, which I interpreted as his way of sparing me the ongoing annoyance. This subtle shift in his handling of Mia's tactics only reinforced my trust in his loyalty and understanding of the delicate family dynamics we navigated together. After Mia's unsuccessful attempts to woo Mark, it seemed she had finally moved on, and so had we. Life was busy with our demanding jobs, and honestly, we had far better things to focus on. However, a casual scroll through social media revealed that Mia had recently connected with Mark's account, actively liking and commenting on nearly every one of his posts, even digging through his archives from 7 to 8 years ago. Feeling uneasy, I impulsively checked Mark's phone and found that Mia had been sporadically texting him. Although he hadn't read her messages, her persistence was evident in the form of missed calls, including one at 4:10 a.m., which raised serious alarms for me.
I confronted Mark about not informing me of her continued attempts to reach out.
He appeared nervous but explained that he had been ignoring her to avoid drama, thinking it would be best not to worry me. Mark then shared that during one late-night call, Mia had reached out in distress, rambling about her traumatic experiences with William. He had answered out of concern, fearing something was wrong. When she started unloading her emotional baggage, Mark advised her to speak with her parents instead and emphasized that such late-night calls were inappropriate. He also mentioned that she should have discussed it with me first. Disturbed by his omission, I expressed my discomfort with him keeping this from me, fearing it might erode my trust. Although he reassured me that he was not swayed by her tactics, I couldn't help but recall countless stories where such situations had led to betrayal. I insisted that any future calls from Mia should be handed to me, hoping to catch her in the act myself. Eventually, that moment came. One night, he woke me up when her number flashed on the screen. I answered,
but she hung up as soon as she realized it wasn't Mark.
The next day, I called her multiple times to confront her, but she didn't answer. I then texted her from Mark's phone, sternly warning her against contacting him at odd hours and stating that any urgent matters should be directed to me, not him. After that, she ceased her communications with him, and I felt a sense of relief. However, the peace was short-lived. After Mark proposed and I shared our engagement news with my family, Mia resumed her old habits, bombarding Mark with messages and videos. I finally called her out on her behavior, releasing all my pent-up frustration. During the call, she barely responded, but the aftermath was immediate. My mother called, furious and accusing me of treating Mia harshly. She claimed my actions had caused Mia panic attacks and urged me to be more considerate towards her sister, who was supposedly struggling with depression following her divorce, an assertion that seemed contradictory given Mia's carefree demeanor post-divorce. Frustrated by my family's reluctance to acknowledge Mia's true nature, I told my dad that if they continued to ignore her manipulative behavior, I would have to distance myself for my own well-being. I was exhausted from being a pawn in Mia's games. Despite all the turmoil Mia had caused over the years, ranging from body shaming and bullying to her audacious attempts to seduce my fiancé, I never anticipated she would go to such lengths to disrupt my life. Especially as our wedding plans progressed, the situation reached a tipping point, but eventually, my mom called to apologize, shaken by witnessing Mia's distress. One of my cousins informed me that Mia had been lamenting my happy life to anyone who would listen, showcasing a mix of envy and regret that was hard to ignore. Her envy reached a boiling point as she spread rumors that I didn't deserve my success or my relationship with Mark, insisting that she, being the more attractive sister, was entitled to the best of everything. When I relayed her words to my mom,
she paused and advised me to focus on my upcoming wedding and the joyful life awaiting me with Mark.
Fortunately, Mia kept a low profile leading up to the wedding day, allowing us to prepare without her interference. However, on the morning of the wedding, an urgent call from Mark's best friend shattered the peace. He insisted I come to Mark's room immediately, along with my parents. My heart raced as we rushed over, fearing the worst. We found Mark semi-conscious and shaken. His groomsmen explained that Mia had tried to sabotage him. As Mark was getting dressed, Mia had shown up with a drink. Despite his refusal, she insisted, and he took a sip to avoid a scene, only to realize it was spiked. He managed to excuse himself to the restroom and alerted his friend. By the time his friend arrived, Mark was slipping into unconsciousness. His quick-thinking friend began recording as he entered the room and captured Mia inappropriately forcing herself on Mark, who was clearly incapacitated. Caught off guard by the friend's arrival, Mia attempted to spin the narrative, claiming they were consensually involved when we confronted her, still visibly affected by the drug. The scene was horrific. The drink, with residue still visible, underscored the severity of her actions. My parents were mortified, and when my mom confronted Mia, who had hastily reapplied her smudged lipstick, Mia claimed it was mutual and that Mark had initiated it. Mom, furious and disgusted by the lie, slapped her and exposed the truth with the video evidence. Realizing her plot had failed, Mia was promptly ejected from the venue by security, instructed never to return. A doctor confirmed Mark had been drugged,
leading to severe nausea and disorientation,
which delayed our ceremony as he recovered. The incident became the scandalous topic of conversation among our guests, overshadowing what should have been a day of celebration. When the wedding finally proceeded, Mark amended his vows, affirming his commitment to protect our relationship from any external negativity. After our honeymoon, my parents visited, extending heartfelt apologies to both of us for Mia's behavior and assuring us that she would no longer be a part of our lives. Dad had finally taken the step to ask her to move out and live independently. The whole ordeal left a lasting imprint on me, shaking the foundations of what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. I was incredibly grateful for Mark's friend's quick action. Without it, I might have doubted Mark's loyalty amid Mia's deceitful scheme. This painful incident ultimately fortified our bond and our resolve to shield our union from any further malice.